Yes, here I am. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special meeting for Community Unit School District 300 Board of Education. This is Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Fiorentino.
Present.
Lamarca.
Present.
McNicholas. McNicholas.
Is she on audio?
Miller.
Present.
Scarpino present. Stevens.
Present.
Zettler.
Okay, what we'll do is we will recall the roll.
And is
we
your
ha-
mic on?
Yes, are your hearing aids on?
There we go. No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. What we will do is we will have another roll call. We have enough here for a quorum. We'll get started. And once we get our technicalities taken care of at that point, we'll make sure, because we want to include everyone. So at this point, I'd ask everyone to rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance. Okay, before we get to the approval of the agenda, I wanted to give a couple of housekeeping remarks, which will also give us a little bit more time to get Mrs. Zettler and Ms. McNicholas signed in. So welcome, everyone. And this is a special board meeting. That means that this board meeting was called for a special purpose. That special purpose is to review modifications to our return to school plan that was presented to us on July 14th. I wanted to point out a couple of things. We have these nice little plexiglass walls between us. We have been informed that if we so choose to, when we are speaking, we may remove our mask. That is not in violation of any health department rule, regulation. We have been told that we can do that. Another point that I would like to make is that while we are here, our last meeting lasted a few hours, and at times it becomes necessary for us to have some water, in which case we are able to remove our mask, take a drink of water, and return our mask.
Fred?
Nancy,
Good
can
evening,
you
Ms.
hear us?
Zettler. Board members, Ms. Zettler just joined, or was actually in limbo while we were logging into the call station. Ms. McNicholas, are you there?
I'm here as well.
And let the record reflect Ms. McNicholas.
Okay, so we both have, we have the 5 board members present, and Nancy Zettler and Mary McNicholas have also joined us via audio, which even in times of non-COVID, board members are allowed to attend board meetings via electronic means, more so now that we have COVID. I would remind board members that, especially because we have a couple of board members audio, that as you need to ask questions or if you have comments, let's be respectful of others and try not to speak over each other. I welcome everyone to our meeting, and I want to point out on our agenda, you will notice people are wondering, wow, where's the vote for the new back-to-school plan? Are there changes? I want to remind people that back on July 14th, we read a resolution that was pretty all-inclusive, giving the superintendent the ability to modify the plan that was presented then in consultation with board president and board members. That plan is now going to be presented. If board members, and I am going to say this, if there is any board member that feels that after presentation and our discussion, you are not comfortable with this, we will need to schedule a meeting for voting. Otherwise, as long as we have consensus and Mr. Hyde has fulfilled the obligations as listed in our resolution of the 14th, we can carry on. Mr. Stevens.
I feel very strongly that we do need to vote on this, that the modifications, depending upon what happens tonight, were meant to be not dramatic. They were meant to be minor, and I think it's important that the board be on record. And if you could take a straw poll tonight.
Oh, yes.
And then at a future time, we could have a 10-minute Zoom meeting to confirm that vote. But
Okay.
I think it's very important that board members are on record for.
I think as much as we can possibly let our community know what that decision is tonight, I think we owe it to our community not to delay that decision. So if there is a need for the formality of a vote, I would still want to do the consensus and straw voting, and then we have to have 48 hours to post. We'll schedule a quick 10-minute session just for the voting. But let's wait before we make that decision until we see where everybody stands at the end of our presentation. With all of those housekeeping comments then, I need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Stevens? Was that
Aye.
Stevens? Oh, I'm sorry. Fiorentino?
Aye.
Lamarca?
Aye.
McNicholas?
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Stevens?
Aye.
Zettler?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, moving on. We are at the superintendent report. And Mr. Hyde, as you go through this, would you prefer that we do as we did at last meeting, asking questions as we go along the way, or will you stop intermittently for questions, or do you want them at the end?
I'd like to provide staged pauses. If not, we'll wait for any
Okay.
remaining questions at the end.
Good to know. Thank you.
So, Madam President, members of the board, members of the community and staff, thank you again for being here this evening. I'm going to remove my mask just for the clarity for those who are online and for recorded purposes. This evening, there are two topics within the superintendent's report, as were previously discussed. The first is a recommendation to change the start of school. In my recommendation, for background information, ISB does provide each school district with the 5 e-learning or remote learning planning days in which to utilize for professional development, training, lesson planning, or any other purpose that would best support the needs of our students and community. At this time, in collaboration with LEAD, we'd like to utilize 2 of those days to push back the start of school. So rather than students starting on Thursday, August 13th, we would utilize the 13th and the 14th for additional professional development for our staff, and then have students begin on Monday, August 17th. Any questions about the recommendation to modify the school start date?
I do not have any. Anyone else? Nancy, Mary, do you have any questions regarding modifying the school start date? No. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Moving into our return to revised school plan. As you know, our initial plan outlined a full return for students K through or pre-K through 8, and then a modified schedule for our high schoolers. The high school schedule was modified, just again for clarification, was modified because due to the restrictions and guidelines that we have to follow in order to promote a safe environment for students to eat, we did not have the capacity within any of our high school facilities to adequately address those needs. And so the recommendation was to place high schoolers on an 8A, B-Day hybrid schedule. At that meeting, we reiterated several times, as well as fellow board members, reiterating the fact that all plans remain fluid. And as much as this plan is our next plan, there are any number of factors that could happen within the next few weeks or even during the course of the implementation of this plan that may require for us to modify it further. All of our changes are based off guidance documents. We do follow guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health, the Illinois School Board, and also we follow CDC and other guidelines, especially in cases where we start to find conflicting information. We also follow local data in collaboration with our local health departments. Our region was removed from its original region when the governor split up the regions, and we are now in Region 8, and so we do track and monitor that data. In addition to which, even though Region 8 includes us with DeKalb, we actually continue to work with McHenry County because we do have several schools that fall into McHenry County. So we do continue to collaborate with all of the local health departments as it relates to where our communities reside or where our students reside and where our schools are placed. And again, we had a strong commitment to remaining flexible at that time. Unfortunately, over the last few weeks, I've apprised the board of a few of these issues of late. There have been numerous changes in policy or guidelines. In several instances, we now find conflicting information, which causes me a great deal of concern. These changes did occur in both ISB, IDPH, and CDC guidance. As I mentioned, there are contradictions within the existing guidance regarding daily screening and even food service. There are contradictions or issues with projected limitations of personal protective equipment due to increases in COVID-19 cases. That's primarily stems from our ongoing conversations and town hall meetings with staff. We found that staff were requesting additional supplies, and it does take time for us to go out to the marketplace and procure those, and we're finding now that we're facing some additional delays. I will provide for the community in my community update a comprehensive list of all of the PPE we've procured, because I don't want anyone assuming or making a false judgment that somehow the district was deficient in our initial ordering. With over 6,000 individual wraparound shields and 1,000 face shields and all of the additional masks and precautions we've taken, we have done more than our due diligence. But in our effort to continue to satisfy the safety concerns from some of our staff, we realize we may have to add some additional equipment. Case counts in Kane and McHenry counties have seen daily increases in positive cases. As you know, there will be an additional screening this week in the Dundee Crown parking lot, Dundee Crown High School, because they are seeing steady increases in COVID cases in that zip code in particular. So the health department would like to go in there and take provide additional screening and testing to determine and do some point tracing to determine what's really happening and get a comprise a broader analysis of what's actually taking place in that community. We've also listened to stakeholder feedback regarding concerns for safety with a full return. So here are some examples of conflicting guidance. So meals in cafeterias came with very specific precautions. As I apprised the board and I apprised the community previously, the guidance from ISB and from IDPH was that we could have students, up to 50 students within a room. There was further guidance that told school districts, please wait. We are exploring the possibility of how school districts can then separate those spaces. Let me give you an example. A gymnasium. A gymnasium can hold several thousand individuals. So limiting it to just 50 people for the purposes of lunch or physical education becomes unattainable. So districts asked ISB for additional guidance and directives from IDPH to allow us the flexibility to separate those spaces using approved physical barriers. We were initially told that we could use plexiglass barriers, after which ISB then, 2 weeks later, called us and notified us that they were not approving those barriers. Our local health departments do approve those barriers, but it places us in a very unique and conflicted position because the guidance from ISB and IDPH says one thing and our local health department is affirming a different thing. Meals in restrooms. So I want to point out again, with all of our effort to identify student seating, to completely restructure the high school schedule to allow for meals to occur in a safe manner, maximizing social distance between students seating directly across from each other now have trifold acrylic shields, and we have very specific criteria for the safety of those students. IDPH and ISB have now directed us to say you can't use plexiglass, you must use full floor-to-ceiling curtains in any instance where students are being served a meal. And yet, in the same guidance document, we're told any amount of students in a classroom, regardless of social distancing, although they strongly encourage us to maintain social distancing, can simply remove their masks and have a snack in classroom at any given time. It's a direct contradiction, and quite frankly, it's one that's caused us alarm for some time and is causing staff and others alarm. Barriers, as I mentioned, we did procure those. Thankfully, we have approval, but I have spoken to the board about moving forward with those, and we're expecting some additional guidance in the near future. Student screening has been mandated to occur daily. That is something we've been working to ensure that our parents do as part of our normal sick policy. Realistically, it's always been an expectation in District 300, in any school district, that parents do not send their children to school sick because it does lead to other issues. The CDC, as of July 23rd, released a document that say they no longer support or suggest that schools utilize a student screening measure each day, which places us in direct contradiction with CDC and local entities who are giving us contradicting guidance. I do not feel comfortable. I will say that after 16 separate town hall meetings with our staff and looking ahead to multiple town hall meetings with our parents, I don't think anyone in our community is comfortable with allowing students to return to school without some level of student screening taking place each day. Students and staff are to be excluded for having COVID symptoms. It has been very clear from the get-go that any student or employee who demonstrates COVID-like symptoms, with the understanding all along that COVID symptoms mirror that of multiple other illnesses, including the flu, that we to isolate those students and staff, and if need be, place them in quarantine until such time as they have a COVID negative test or they're symptom-free. Typically, that takes upwards of 10 to 14 days based off the local guidance. The CDC, again on July 23rd, released a separate document very much affirming the need for students to return to school, but at the bottom said, by the way, school districts, you now need to figure out how to sort students who regularly have illnesses and determine which instance you're going to send them home for quarantine. So, for example, they cite that students will typically have, I believe the phrase is anywhere from 6 to 8 respiratory or type illnesses any given year. I would ask you, at what point do I assume that those symptoms are COVID or not COVID? I think it places an undue and an unfair burden on a school district to arrive at those decisions. I recognize the fact that there are students with ongoing medical issues, but I think for the overarching safety of our staff and their fellow students, that is not something that the district has flexibility or the latitude, to make those types of universal decisions outside of a medical professional, which we are not. So those are examples of the conflicting guidance we've received to date that cause our union, and cause our staff, cause our board, cause our community a great deal of concern. Here's the CDC guidance that I just referenced on the 23rd. I have provided links to all of these. The board has been provided the links previously. The CDC does not currently recommend universal symptom screening or screening for all students in grades K through 12 to be conducted by schools. I think, again, that flies in the face of everything that we've worked hard to develop throughout the summer as one of our primary safety precautions to help prevent students from coming to school who are ill. Whether it's influenza or whether it's COVID, the reality of it is both are detrimental to our community. I would share the following data with the board and with our community. For example, last year alone, during the months that are typically associated with influenza, Ms. Schmidt, our district nurse, provides data regularly to the local health department and to ISB. We have to report our numbers as far as the percentage of students and number of students who are absent for influenza symptoms. On any given day, from October to March, we have an average of 1,077 students across the district absent on any given day. And these are weekly statistics. Excuse me, so it's not every day, it's a weekly statistic. The total number of those students on average who are reporting, so out of 1,077 students per week, the total number who are calling in reporting flu-like symptoms is just 74. Or just 7%. Of the total number of illnesses reported or called in, only 7% are attributed to flu-like symptoms. It causes me a great deal of concern that we're not even accurately capturing influenza in our school district, let alone will we be prepared to capture COVID in the absence of screening. And I've been asked multiple times, so what's the consequence for a family if they don't follow the guidelines. And respectfully, the only consequence that a family would face is that should you send a child to school ill and that child reports symptoms, that child will face a 2-week quarantine. So it's simply not worth sending your child to school for one day when you're going to be inconvenienced for the next 2 weeks. The other portion to this I have to point out is when students come to school sick and we end up having to send them home because they're too close. If you recall in my last presentation, we talked about social distancing and what constitutes a close or an exposure. If you're seated less than 6 feet away from another student or staff member for upwards to 15 minutes, regardless of having a mask, you are considered someone who has been exposed and you must also go home. So tracking a student between the school bus back to the classroom, using these numbers alone, we're sending hundreds of students home for upwards of 2 weeks due to the flu, potentially due to the flu. But we can't disregard that because COVID mirrors the flu-like symptoms. And while the data suggests that students are not as susceptible, while the data suggests that students do not have the same mortality or morbidity rate as adults, while the symptomology is lessened, or the impact or effect that COVID has on children is lessened, it does not lessen the impact or the threat to 2,400 employees. And again, that's a large concern for us as well, especially in the absence of something like daily screening. I do not know, and the reason why I'm making a recommendation tonight is we need additional time to figure out how the CDC guidance will now influence the state's guidance. Because in the absence of the state recommending or requiring daily screening, our district will have to implement something actionable for our community. Here again, in the second document I provide for you, this is a portion taken directly from, again, the source link. The last paragraph, I think it says a lot, where it says, additionally, students with chronic conditions like asthma or allergies may have symptoms like cough or nasal congestion without having any infection at all. As a result, symptom screenings have the potential to exclude some students from school repeatedly, even though they do not have COVID-19 or any contagious illness. This, in turn, may worsen disparities in students who already miss school frequently because of chronic medical conditions. And above that, again, it puts the onus on the school district to figure out how to determine what is a pre-existing medical condition versus what symptoms that align to COVID are the ones that are truly actionable on our part. So I bring forward a recommendation to our board and to our community with the understanding in advance that this is going to create a great deal of concern. I am recommending again the following: that we modify the school start date to push back the start of school till Monday, August 17th, 2 days later than originally planned. I also recommend that the district reopen fully remote through the end of the first quarter or October 9th, through the first 9 weeks of school. This provides us with an opportunity to stagger and develop a phased return. Again, in the absence of clear and explicit guidance, I do believe we have to be more cautious than we initially had hoped we could do with all of the precautions we had previously implemented. So at this point, again, phase 1 would allow us to go fully remote, August 17th through October 9th. And in phase 2, we would inform parents about this, and I'll provide dates in a moment, of October 12th through May 20th through the end of the school year. We have multiple options available to us. And those options include returning to the original recommendation. They include a hybrid schedule of A-B, where students will alternate between being in attendance on alternating days in grade level in all our grades K through 12. I did not include pre-K there because that's an ongoing discussion about where the value or the impact of remote learning, the benefits of remote learning, and what truly benefits our pre-K students versus in-person instruction. But we realize that that's going to be a conversation that requires potentially some modification to the school day and some other factors. Extension of remote learning is also our third option, depending on local conditions. Dr. Scarpino.
So just to be clear, Mr. Hyde, under phase 2, the darkened circles are options. Those are not, we're not going to be doing every single one of those. Those are options.
No, sir. Those are the options that the district would explore and share with parents based, again, on local conditions and information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Stevens.
Are you comfortable sometime prior to October 9th putting
That's, I believe that's next. Or it's in the upcoming slide. Yes, sir, good question. So what options will the district consider again in the future? To Dr. Scarpino's point, just for absolute clarity, we could potentially extend the remote learning through the end of the first semester. We could transition to a hybrid option, an A-Day, B-Day. I use A-Day, B-Day because most people are familiar with that. Or we transition back to the initial plan of in-person K-8 and a hybrid for 9-12. Please note there are asterisks on the the second and third bullet for a reason. Both of those options would continue to provide families with a choice that should we return even in a hybrid, if they opt for full remote, that they would still have that choice. As of this evening, the number of applicants for full remote was at 1,000. I know somebody else pulled it for me earlier. 1,036. Oh, 1,336 submissions and requests for remote learning.
And
Madam
July
President.
31st was our deadline, so there
July-
may still have been
That's
quite a
correct.
few more
That's correct.
for that.
So what conditions would allow for a full return? Again, just as a reminder, a full return requires that we be in phase 5 with a vaccine and minimal disruptions. To Mr. Stevens' point, parents and guardians will receive updates regarding the status each 9 weeks for each 9-week grading period as follows. We will notify families as of September 11th. There is a board meeting that occurs the Tuesday before each one of these communications. So on September 11th, that's a Friday. November 13th is a Friday. February 12th, I believe, is a Friday. Parents would receive updates as to the status of the upcoming next grading period or quarter. High school people are most commonly associate these with semesters, but we really are broken out into 9-week grading periods and or quarters. Somehow the two titles on these slides got reversed. Again, so what conditions would allow for a full return? The district would return to full in-person instruction if the following conditions are met. The state moves to phase 5 of the Restore Illinois plan as follows. Testing, tracing, treatment are widely available throughout the state. Either a vaccine is developed to prevent additional spread of COVID-19, a treatment option is readily available that ensures healthcare capacity is no longer a concern, or there are no new cases over a sustained period of time. And we provided this source back to the Restore Illinois plan there. So I know that the issue with remote learning brings up a lot of questions, so I'll ask the board's permission to go through several slides that I believe will start to address some of those. So what about working families? We recognize, and as I indicated in our first proposal, one of the greatest concerns are students who do not, or who basically work in a household or reside in a household with one single income earner or one single parent, which creates a great deal of concern for those students and their supervision when parents are not at home. We're very grateful that we have some really fantastic relationships with our community partners, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, and local park districts who have all been in contact, we've been in contact with, and we've been working proactively to secure a specified number of places that we can place students in. If demand outpaces space availability, we will go to a lottery system, but they will provide supervision each day from 8 to 5. Supervision will be provided in our buildings. It may not be a family's closest facility because we have some concerns with where we place these programs. But we will post the information online and we will notify parents via email when updated information is available by August 17th with the intent for supervision and child care to begin on August 24th. Did I see a question? I thought I saw a hand. Will the district still provide food service? Yes, the district will update its website to reflect how we will distribute food. A lot of lessons were learned last year. I want to say thank you again to our local food pantry, Ms. Lamarca and all of her assistants and her group that work hard to make sure that our families have sustainable food and meals for their children. The lessons we learned was rather than doing daily distributions, we provide packages that cover families from anywhere from 3 to 5 days at a time with both breakfast, snacks, and lunch, or with breakfast, snacks, and lunches each day. So we will provide updated information for families that require this service throughout the duration of our remote learning experience. What about labs and after-school activities? The district, obviously, we continue to be committed to supporting all of our extracurriculars and programs. There is a ruling pending with IHSA in the state as to the status of several sports clubs and activities. It's important, I believe, that we should get an update by Wednesday. If they're delayed, I would imagine we get an update relatively soon. I know there's a lot of conjecture out there, rumor and speculation about what IHSA is going to recommend. We have heard that there are several options that they are truly exploring, including modification to the current schedule and or shifting contact sports to spring, moving non-contact sports to fall, or the third option, again, would be to push all sports into spring, but provide shortened or abbreviated seasons to ensure that students don't find themselves in conflict. We have, as you know, we have students, just as we do in the performing arts, who take advantage of choir, orchestra, and band, and maybe even in dance. But then we have students who are multiple sport athletes, and the concern, I believe, there from IHSA is they don't want to force a student into choosing one over the other. We have no additional insight outside of that, but that is the best update and information that we have to date. All of our activities we'll continue to provide supports for. I've had conversations with our booster clubs today to provide some additional insight to them because, as you recall, we adjusted our visitor policy. It's largely not even applicable now as we transition to remote learning. But it is important that I have a conversation with them because in the absence of students in school, in the absence of after-school activities, their fundraising ability is diminished significantly. And so we have assured them that no program, for example, music and art, music in particular and theater, who rely on fundraising to help offset the costs of some of their licensing for upcoming performances, they will not suffer as a result of this. The district is prepared to ensure that no program will go unfunded for the purposes of fulfilling those types of events. All of these activities have to be addressed, debate, driver's education, career and technical education, family consumer sciences clubs, science labs. We will provide opportunities for those students. We continue to partner with Durham. We will, over the next 2 weeks, provide a schedule to families that will outline our process for how students will be able to get on a Durham bus, potentially, and arrive at school for the purposes of completing some of these activities. But it is going to take us a little bit more time in planning and to coordinate the logistics of that. Many of our clubs will continue to function via Zoom. For example, there are a lot of our student government clubs and other activities clubs that can continue to operate. Beta Club, all of those can continue to operate in a remote environment. Not ideal, but at least they can continue to function and operate. So what about academic supplies and Chromebooks? If the district's going to full remote for the first 9 weeks, how does my child get access to their materials? Right now, our schools are working through all the logistics. Mr. Emrickson, Ms. Pasco, I know Ms. Meyer is involved to a certain extent with the media paras. They are currently finalizing the deployment plan. The plan's finalized, but they will provide dates and times in which we will schedule families, as we did pickup, to come pick up their children's Chromebooks and return their original device because we are deploying all new devices. At the same time, we are working to provide teachers with time during that week of in-service so that they can gather student materials and have it all issued to the greatest extent possible. I cannot guarantee that everything's going to be deployed at one date and time, but to the greatest extent possible. Let's take students in elementary school. They will get a packet along with their Chromebook that has their math workbook, has their math manipulatives, has some art kits, has various materials that they will need to stay engaged with remote learning. This is not the remote learning we did previously. This is a very different approach to remote learning, far more synchronous, far more live instruction, far more engagement, and a focus on current standards. If you recall the difference last year, ISBE's recommendations were focus on remediation, focus on reteaching, don't emphasize grading. We were very limited in what we were allowed or encouraged to do at that time. That is not the case here. So students, again, much credit to Shelley Nackey and the group working with her, from Lee, Julie Voss, Julie Kreppel, and others. Lisa, four of you said Harris? Okay. Who worked, I still didn't hear it. Harris, Lisa Harris, thank you, who all worked very closely with Shelley to ensure that we have our sensory kits available for some of our students as well. So those will all be deployed. Instruments, I want to go back to that, I apologize. Music instruments will be assigned by individual teachers. Sheila Karate Kagan, who supervises that department, she's our director over fine and performing arts, had some concerns that teachers expressed to her that there's a fitting process to most instruments. Myself being a non-musician did not know that. And so she indicated that teachers will schedule appointments and times for those students to come and be fitted and issued their music device. So what will remote learning look like? So synchronous instruction will occur Monday through Thursdays. Teachers and students will be interactive live via Zoom. Teachers are delivering instruction, they're modeling, they're providing for practice, they're providing feedback, and they're supporting collaborative groups. Again, as we pointed out last time, depending on the duration of a class period, the teacher is not always standing in front of the class directing instruction. More often than not, the teacher introduces a topic, provides some modeling, provides some direction, and then facilitates learning in smaller groups with students. So parents should expect to see, teachers engaging differently with students. Sometimes it'll be independent work. Other times it will be small collaborative settings where students are assigned. You can assign students. Our high school teachers were very good at this, assigning students to small collaborative groups within Zoom, and then the teacher can actually, they're the only one who can jump between groups to provide additional feedback, to listen to the conversations, to provide additional directions. So our teachers will be actively engaged with synchronous instruction. We are providing a handbook for our staff, and there are some pieces to the synchronous instruction we know we're going to have to clarify. Very much like my use of the phrase live video feed. Very easily and very quickly misinterpreted. And so we will be sending out information first thing tomorrow morning to all of our staff with information about the Institute, the pre-service training, and what they can expect to see there. We're providing them guidance on synchronous instruction and use of their cameras. And so there's a great deal of information going out to our staff tomorrow, as well as the handbook, the synchronous learning handbook, excuse me. So the asynchronous will take place on Fridays. Asynchronous will be a combination of things. Teachers will be utilizing some of that time for grading purposes, for lesson planning, but also to be following up with students who require assistance. A lot of our teachers wanted that time to be able to provide additional tutoring and intervention for children who are seemingly not engaging or may be falling behind throughout the week during some of the synchronous lessons. They'll follow up with students who have been absent or who are missing assignments. They'll follow up with families when students are failing to participate in class, and they'll schedule a time for students to come in to complete labs, complete an assessment, and or other activities as needed. We're leaving that up to the teacher's discretion by and large, because at that point they're in the best position to determine what their students need. This is not assigning and assessing. Our teachers will not simply post assignments in Haiku and tell students to go look for it here. That is not the experience that our children will have. It will take us some time to continue to support our staff, but I do have the greatest confidence in our employees. The board has received multiple emails from staff encouraging a transition and that we consider remote. Throughout those emails, I think they all continue to recommit themselves to doing better than last year's e-learning. So that we're in a good place there. Will the district modify schedules as we did last year? So the district right now, we are working with LEAD to review and revise academic schedules as needed. There is a push and pull with revising schedules. Modifying the schedule to have fewer classes means classes are longer. And so teachers will need more time to plan, because essentially they're teaching 2 lessons potentially in a day that they otherwise may have tried to teach split across 2 days. So there is a lot of conversation and planning that has to go into that. Plus, we don't want the assumption to be that teachers are not fully engaging our students, which, again, I believe by and large was not everyone's experience last year. Our teachers truly were rock stars last year given the circumstances, and they did an amazing job with remote learning to the greatest extent that they could. Any schedule will reflect students attending classes for a minimum of 5 to 6 hours per day. The minimum in the state of Illinois, as mandated by school code, is a minimum of a 5-hour day. So if there is a modification to a schedule, for example, if we eliminate lunch during the day to shorten or abbreviate the day and then build that time in so teachers can use it for additional planning or whatever purposes they may need. Again, students are home. They don't need a lunch period built into their schedule. That's what we're talking about. We will maintain our focus on core instruction and our specials and electives and ensure that every student maintains at least the 5 to 6 hours of instruction per day to be in compliance with the state requirement. Students will have access to their course schedules on or near August 6th. Remote learning schedules, if there are changes, if there are initial recommendations for changes to how the school day flows. So students will receive their schedules unless the student requests a specific schedule change. That is their daily schedule. However, how that day plays out in a day-to-day basis is what we redefined last time, if you recall, where we place certain periods on certain days. If there are any changes like that that do occur prior to the start of school, we promise and we're committed to providing parents an update no later than Friday, August 7th, so that they'll know exactly what type of daily schedule their children will follow. There were a lot of concerns last year, in particular at elementary level. We made a decision to modify, in collaboration with LEAD, we made the request to modify the elementary day. Teachers were overextending themselves. They were doing far too much, quite frankly, in many areas, and we felt the need to pull back. The result, though, was specials did not flow or function as they were intended to. So again, the survey data we received back from families and from staff from last year's e-learning experiment, or e-learning wasn't an experiment, but last year's e-learning implementation is there are a lot of lessons we learned. So again, while we're open and we're having an ongoing conversation about tweaking and refining the schedules, there are some very important data points from last year that we have to include in that conversation, because we don't want to intentionally create a situation where a PE teacher at elementary, instead of just servicing the grade levels they're typically assigned to, got assigned to a Monday for all students, and then they're having to create multiple lesson plans, and they really couldn't be present with their students. We created that. That was not the teacher's fault. That was absolutely the district's fault. And so that's a lot of the part here when it comes to school schedules that we have to continue to work through, and that's why it's also important for us to continue to collaborate with LEAD and each one of their respective members who represent a different school level and or program area. School start times at this time will remain unchanged. There was an initial discussion about the possibility of moving start times. The problem is, as this plan remains fluid, I know our high schoolers would love to have a schedule that allows them to start as late as 9 a.m. The problem then becomes if we quickly go back, because we're able to revert back to more in-person due to changes in local conditions, like I said, the availability of a vaccine or other factors. The issue is, have we created a situation where students now are acclimated to waking up at a certain time, attending class at a certain time, and that's just not how we can bus. We have attempted every different solution we can come up with to try and alter school start times. We just can't, considering the fact that we run a three-tiered system and we share a lot of the same buses and drivers across those tiers. So what does this mean for my special needs child? So additional information will be provided for students in LEAP, SOAR, Life, Multi-Needs, and 300+. These students will participate remotely via Zoom through September 4th. However, during that time, Ms. Nackey and her team will be working with families directly to schedule walk-in services, OT, PT, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, social workers, and other services throughout that initial 2-week period of time. The district is also working right now, again, in conversation with LEAD about what this might look like if we want to return our most fragile students on a more consistent basis. So what may happen is students initially come back 2 days a week, then they come back 3 days a week, then they come back for 4 days a week. Those are the types of things we're talking about, because again, these students really are best served within that environment with all of the resources and materials and supports embedded within the same school structure. Mr. Stevens.
How are special needs children who are not handled by our district, but we subcontract out to a different facility, how are those going to be?
So unless that school designates that they're altering and or not accepting students, they would follow whatever school schedule that school provides them.
And if they don't provide any service right now, or they will?
they're required to.
They're required to.
Yes, sir. So all other students who have an IEP or a 504 will continue to be supported via their IEP or their 504 plan and our staff. If a family has questions, we do ask that they contact their child's case manager or education service specialist. But again, families will very shortly receive a letter from Ms. Nackey, your Assistant Superintendent for Education Services, with more information, because we want to, again, reassure these families that, unlike last year when we went out remote, we have really adjusted and adapted well to this environment so that we can best support these students as well. I want to point out that the process that we're utilizing here, that phased approach to bring students back, is something that I'm hearing from my team, from board, from others, as a more effective approach to just an all-in. And so what we will look at are various grade levels, various student groups, and start to bring them back. I think also allowing those students to have exposure on their campuses throughout this remote learning experience is very important. They can make those connections, they can visit their classrooms, they can get a sense and feel of the school, and quite frankly, I think we're open to a lot of unique suggestions, and I know some have come to me. I know LEAD has suggested some very unique opportunities and possibilities in the near future, and I'd like to continue to have those discussions and then bring those forward at a future date. Will assignments be graded? The answer is yes. Unlike in the spring, all assignments will be graded in accordance to the teacher's guidelines and or the school grading policies that have been established. First and foremost, students are responsible for all of their assignments. The teacher will work with the student to continue to allow them to amend, to resubmit, but at the end of the day, students are ultimately responsible for their assignments. Teachers will define their course objectives and grading policies in their syllabus. One of the things we're asking our staff to do here, and I'll touch on this at the very bottom, but for middle school and high school staff, we're asking them to create a virtual introduction of their class and of themselves. So we're providing time for teachers to be able to do that. We're providing a recommendation for them of a script. We use WeVideo. They don't have to necessarily be on video the entire time. We know we have some people who are truly intimidated by being on live videos, so we're giving them various options. We have staff there ready to help them throughout that pre-service institute to ensure that they can do this, but we want that to be part of the virtual school opening, the welcome back that our schools are preparing. So these teachers would all be listed at the secondary level by name. If my child has that teacher, I can click on that respective teacher, get to see a video or an introduction of their class, their expectations, what students can expect of them, contact information, all of that generic information you would get in a typical open house visit. You don't get the personal touch, but that by and large we're trying to address this the best we can. It's far more difficult to do what I'm about to explain that we're going to do with elementary teachers and staff at the secondary level. Elementary teachers have a dedicated class. Teachers at the secondary level may see anywhere from 120 upwards to 150 or 160 students on any given day. So the ability for secondary teachers to follow the elementary proposal is far more difficult. So the elementary day, prior to the first day, we'll ask our teachers to assign students a project where the student can focus basically on who they are, introducing themselves and talking about their family, those types of things. Our teachers do have the ability to email our students. Students do have their Chromebooks. There's no difference between last year. We'll provide directions to families. But then the teacher will provide a sign-up sheet for families. For the first 2 days of school, it will not typically flow like a traditional school day. We do believe that relationships matter a great deal, especially at the primary grades. And I think it's important to point out that we would schedule these meetings in 10 to 15-minute increments. They'll focus on establishing relationship. They are one-on-one, so it's just the teacher with the child and with the child's parent and or caregiver, and they get a chance to just converse and meet each other. Unfortunately, we can't replicate that in person because the cleaning requirements and things in between visitations would extend this 2 weeks. But I think by and large, this is a great process. It was one suggested by LEAD and one that we were very excited about, or I should say by a LEAD member. And we did run this by them. So we are asking for this to take place during the first 2 days of class, and then the teacher basically can reconvene the class depending on their enrollment. They may only need 1 day, depending on how large their class is. If their class is a smaller class, they may complete all this in 1 day. If their classes are larger, it may take them a day and a half or the full 2 days, and then they'll reconvene and have students meet and greet each other. General expectations of our students throughout this process. Students will log into their assigned classes on time for each class period. We are required to take attendance. Lunch, study hall, late start, early releases do not require attendance. We do not take attendance during those times normally. Students are expected to be actively engaged and participate throughout the lesson. Unlike last year, some of the feedback we received from staff and others was that students, last year we did allow, because of some concerns that students had expressed, and we will still address some of those on a case-by-case basis, but students are required to keep their camera on and keep their microphone on for the duration of class unless directed otherwise by their teacher. Students will abide by all of our policies and expectations outlined in our acceptable usage policy. Students will abide by all the policies and expectations outlined in our student code of conduct. Students, again, as I indicated, have the ultimate obligation and responsibility to complete their assignments, but they're also expected to communicate with teachers. And so we want students to be actively engaging their teachers and communicate any needs or issues related to the manner in which they're engaging in e-learning or remote learning. So the general expectations of staff are very similar to what we proposed last time. The difference at this point is staff would deliver the live synchronous lesson each day, Monday through Thursday. The lesson format, again, will vary from their classroom. It varies on where they are. Typically, when you start a new unit of instruction, there tends to be more direct instruction or teachers delivering lecture, modeling, and things at the beginning of a unit. As you get to the middle and end of the unit, students are starting to, it's the gradual release model, the I do, we do, you do. So I own the lesson at the beginning, I transition, and we're working collaboratively, and then at some point the teacher releases the lesson to students, and then the teacher then is a facilitator assisting students with their assignments. So we expect to see some of that. Teachers will ensure that activities allow for students at home to participate fully. Lessons and activities will be posted each day prior to class, which is similar to what we did last year. Teachers will ensure that all documents, videos, links, and other resources are appropriate and function. If there was a concern that arose last year, and kudos to Ms. Pasco and to the DLCs and others, there were some issues where we provided links to YouTube or other videos and other services and resources that were required for the day's lesson, only to find that for some reason, they were blocked for some students, unblocked for others, but we have established better protocols to assist with that. Also, we are in the midst of conversations with DESA, I would say. We have a follow-up later this week to have a conversation about the role of the media paras throughout a remote learning experience because, again, students won't be present in the building, so we'd like to utilize them a little differently to support student needs with heat tickets and having to replace Chromebooks and other things to free up our DLCs to do what DLCs do best, which is coaching and collaborating with our teachers. So we see that as a unique opportunity, but that has yet to be finalized. But I think it's a good example of the ongoing conversations and collaboration we're having with all of our groups. Obviously, we want to encourage and support our teachers that they maintain a focus on student wellness. Throughout this has been a very difficult experience. I will tell you that the graduation ceremony meant far more to people than a normal graduation ceremony ever had. As we stood up there and were drenched under our robes in the heat or between the rainstorms, I think it's important that we realize that that was the first opportunity that class had of having closure together as a unified group to the greatest extent possible. I mean, we had to split them in half, but to the greatest extent possible, that was the only opportunity they had for that. That's difficult. Think about that for a team. Think about how incredibly difficult that is to not be able to socialize. As human beings, we are incredibly social creatures. And I will tell you, during one of the town halls that I had with my staff, as many concerns that resonated with me, and there were a lot. There were a lot of good questions, a lot of concerns. There's a lot of fear, balanced concern, balanced optimism. I mean, we heard everything. But there was one thing that a preschool person said to me, or asked of me, that I will tell you completely affirmed my decision to make this recommendation. And the teacher asked, if I got a little one and they're really upset and they're crying, can I lean down? Can I kneel down and hug that kid? And I had to say no. What environment is that for our kids to come back to? And it really resonated with me. I struggled with that question for 3 days because that is the picture of what we're dealing with. Yes, there's ambiguity in the plans, but it really drove the message home to me that we're going to have young children in an environment with adults who have masks, sterile plexiglass all around them. They can't interact with their peers. They can't interact with the staff. They can't hear you, so you talk louder. They can't see your face, so they can't tell if you're smiling. They can't tell if you're frowning, but you're talking louder because you want them to hear you through your mask. And so now the student's confused. Are you yelling at me? Is that the environment we want our youngest kids exposed to? And right now, the answer is no. So that really drove it home for me. But we need our staff to be there for our students. They are the first line. So many of our kids in crisis go to our teachers, our SROs and others, our counselors, our social workers. Kids build relationships with people they feel comfortable with, which is why it's important that we have a variety of people in our buildings that children can build relationships with. And so it's important that our teachers maintain that focus on social emotional wellness. We also want our teachers to be available for student-parent questions or concerns. So staff will respond to emails, just as we said last year. If they receive an email after 2 p.m., respectfully, we ask parents and students to allow them more time. I do know that our staff typically respond to students as quickly as they can because they know it's related to an assignment or other issues, but we do ask respectfully. Many of our staff have children of their own in a remote learning environment, and they do have to leave at the end of the day and then be attentive as a parent and or as a spouse to others. Fridays, again, as we said, would be the asynchronous, and we've already listed those things previously that teachers would be working on with students. So our expectations of parents and guardians that they encourage their child to complete assigned work, they communicate concerns with teachers, related service staff, and or support staff. If a parent has a concern about the instruction, the frequency, those types of things, we do ask parents to reach out and communicate first and foremost to the teacher, then to their school administrator if need be. But please maintain that line of communication, because what you may believe your child needs, the teacher may not be aware of. Because again, remember, we don't know these children yet. And it's important for parents to be true partners with us and let us know how we can best support you and best support your learner. We ask them to also consider appropriate working conditions for their children. Please find a way to give them a secure environment, a secure location, dining room table, place elsewhere. I've read online where some of our parents were anticipating the possibility of remote, and they've gone out and bought student desks for their households, and we're not encouraging that as much as just provide a current, a reoccurring place where that student knows, when I sit here, this is school, and I'm here. We do ask that they continue, especially with our younger students. Unfortunately, it is going to require monitoring. Our youngest students, at times I joke and say it's like herding cats, but it is. And many of us recall that with our children when they were younger. They were all over the place, and so we do ask that parents assist us, or guardians or child care providers assist us with that, with remote learning each day. We also, and I have to drive this point home, in this environment of remote learning, the greatest concern our teachers have is that someone is out there critiquing them, taking a video snapshot of them, taking a photo of them. And while I am more acclimated and accustomed to that because of what some of our students put out on Twitter and other places with my face on it, our teachers are not. And our teachers are working and trying to do their best in this new environment, in this new reality. And so we want to encourage parents, please, please, please refrain from reposting pictures and comments about their teachers and their students with their remote learning experience. Please keep that between you and your child's teacher. It is important. It's also important for parents to understand that you should never show another student in a video or a picture because you're getting access to a classroom that otherwise you would not have access to. We will still follow our same procedures where the cameras will not show students, but in a Zoom classroom, there are times where that student will see people that they're collaborating with, not the whole class per se, but they will see others. So we want to encourage some caution there. And again, teachers are not solely responsible for the redirection engagement of students. Learners may also require frequent assistance and guidance at home. That is important for us to continue to reiterate. General expectations of our administrators, that we provide support and assist with problem solving with staff and families, that we manage our systems, we manage our procedures to ensure student access to instructional resources and materials is appropriate, ongoing, and problem-free, that we provide continuous communication and support for remote learning, that we keep a focus on student social emotional well-being, and we're going to provide teachers with more tools and resources to help maintain that focus. That we contact parents and guardians and/or related service staff, counselors, deans, case managers, if there are any concerns with student engagement and/or work completion. That we establish and/or support collaborative structures to best support teacher innovation and practice. So in this environment, when we talk about synchronous learning, it could look very different depending on the type of classroom you're in. And our teachers are going to be experimenting with new strategies and new approaches. And so it's important that they be in a community or in a culture within their building that supports and nurtures innovation and trying new things, even though it may not always be successful. So we provide a review and respond to teacher, student, and parent feedback on a regular basis, and that we communicate daily with teachers and counselors to address questions or address support needs. That is an absolute imperative. For remote learning support, we know that some of our families, again, will struggle with access to appropriate Wi-Fi. I received an email this afternoon, I believe the board did as well, with concerns about Wi-Fi connectivity within certain communities in our school district. And while we do not have the means to address community deployment issues, we do have the ability to provide other access points for our families that has been largely successful to date. We have over 1,000 hotspots available for deployment. We also have other supports in place for our families. This slide in particular, I misread it, I apologize. I thought it was our support for students electronically and Wi-Fi. This is a remote learning support and where families can find information about how to access Haiku. Haiku has been completely redesigned by Ms. Pasco and the team. Again, another example of collaboration with LEAD and others that all provided feedback. So we have one consistent platform. There are now instructional videos that will be posted so families will be able to readily find information, know how to post something, know how to confirm that an assignment's been submitted, how if a form, a good example is there are apps that allow forms and worksheets that are sent home for students to complete, to make those fillable, so we have all of that information available. But to a great extent, that will be done prior to them even being sent home. But if they have problems with Haiku or access, we have staff and a process in place to allow them to gain access. I've already addressed this slide. What about those without Wi-Fi? Again, all of our resources can be found online. We have various, as you know, various relationships with different internet service providers across the community, AT&T, Xfinity, Comcast, and others, who all provide reduced and/or free services to our families who qualify. And as I said, we have 1,000 hotspots that we are prepared to deploy, and we do have a process for vetting that. So almost at the end here, so what does this mean for SAT for seniors? I know a lot of parents who had juniors last year have concerns about this. We will still offer the SAT. This remote learning period ends October 9th. Unless there's an extension, October 14th, students are scheduled for the SAT. On the 14th, freshmen and seniors will test on campus. On that day, sophomores and juniors will have an asynchronous learning day across the board. We'll remind families, and we'll put this on the calendar, they will not attend school because we need all available spaces to spread out our freshmen and our seniors to take the SAT exams. The SAT, as every year, it will end approximately at 1 p.m., and then our buses will depart after that. For our sophomores and juniors, they will take the PSAT and the MSSQT on October 28th. That will then become an asynchronous learning day for freshmen and seniors. We'll utilize, again, classroom spaces, large gym spaces, and whatnot. But again, because we're restricted to 50, we really need multiple areas across the board. And considering the importance of the test, we want to provide a quiet environment with fewer transitions, less disruptions. And so that's why we're alternating those days. That has been our practice largely to date. And again, this test will end roughly at noon. It's a little shorter, and students in buses will depart relatively or immediately after that. I believe on those days, I don't see Dr. Schumacher here, but if my recollection is correct, we typically offer a grab-and-go lunch on both days for those students prior to their departure. In conclusion, a couple key points. I want the community to understand. I absolutely understand to the greatest extent. I've heard from many of our families about concerns with in-person instruction. I've heard concerns about what happens if we go out remotely. We know that there are issues with childcare. Please understand, for our staff listening, I do not get the sense from our community that they are focusing on childcare being our primary obligation. I believe that families just find themselves in a very unique and difficult situation of having this protracted COVID issue impacting them since last March. I think we have to acknowledge that we're all struggling with this. And, our plans will continue to remain fluid. I do not expect everyone to agree 100% with our plans. We do the best we can with the information we have before us. We collaborate. We've been at the table since May. This process has changed frequently. I'll point again to the July 23rd updates from the CDC. I'll point again to a call that occurred on the 21st from ISB that said, by the way, we told you could do this, but now we're telling you can't, as prime examples of why we must remain fluid. I would have loved nothing else for this entire process to remain static. I could have had a fully developed plan from the get-go months ago, and yet every time we felt that we had arrived at a final place where we could make a definitive decision, something else changed. And so we find ourselves here understanding we must remain flexible. I do understand that, again, as I pointed out, that this is not going to meet everyone's specific needs and or interests. It does, however, I believe, address the needs of our entire community, not at the individual level, but as a comprehensive whole. I believe it's in the best interest of our staff. I believe it's in the best interest of our students, because we do have an obligation. I do have an obligation to ensure their health, safety, and welfare on a regular basis. I do believe that we remain committed to finding ways to return students and staff into in-person instruction. That will probably be a phased-in approach. I think if the opportunity presents itself, we'll move faster rather than slower. But there are a lot of people, I think the board realizes that as we've watched surrounding communities, we've watched others, there are a lot of conversations, a lot of people have to come along in this process. And a lot of individualized interests and or concerns that have to be addressed as well. I want to commend our team, who have, I will tell you, I think collectively, we've all taken maybe half a day off this summer because of the changing plans. It has, I tell you, no matter how many times this plan has changed or we've had to tweak or refine it, I have never once gotten a complaint. I have never once heard a moan. Everybody is hands-on, and I will tell you, I'm thoroughly impressed, again, by the competency and the commitment demonstrated by my team on a regular basis. Whether it's Ms. O'Keefe telling me what I can and can't do legally, as I keep trying to remind people, my attorney's job for me is to provide recommendations, not to contain me in the box, but she still does a good job of containing me in the box. I have Cara and Lindsay Jonas and various CATS team members on the academic side. I've got Ms. Harkin, Dan Opels, Jason Emmerson on the operational side, and Deb's here tonight, and Shelley's here for SPED. I mean, we've got an amazing team. And, we've got an HR director who is working daily to try and manage not only the staffing of new vacancies and positions as we prepare to onboard over 100 new employees in the midst of this, while he's still trying to manage staffing needs and requests because of concerns with COVID and other exposure type issues. He is managing that throughout this entire process. So kudos to our team. I apologize to our community if this does wreak havoc on your household. That is not our intent. I think by and large, as most people reflect, with the commitment that this is not e-learning from last year, you will not just get worksheets assigned. Your teacher will not be absent. Our teachers will be present. They'll be working with kids. We have that shared commitment. I think that this experience and this opportunity is the best one we have before us for many of the reasons I cited. I do not want anyone to believe that we don't care about them, that, we've ignored issues. That is not the truth. We have a 1,000-page document in our index that clearly shows the level of planning commitment we've dedicated to this topic since day one. And while that's not necessarily a public document, the board has seen that. And I think you can see the level of commitment, planning, and effort that we've put forward to ensure a safe and healthy environment for our students and staff, and hopefully we'll be able to get them to return soon. So thank you, Madam President. Thank you, members of the board, and I will take questions.
Okay, so I think we have two parts here. I think we've got board members that are going to want to ask questions, and then after that, I think we're going to have board members that are going to want to just make general observations. So we're going to start with questions. What I'm going to do, again, for Nancy and Mary that are audio but not visual, I'm going to start, and we're going to go down through the board members. Then I'll go to Mary and then Nancy. I'll ask questions last. By the time it gets to me, hopefully I'll be answered. Then we'll do some comments. So, Mr. Fear, and please, if you do not have questions, don't feel like I'm putting you on the spot. That's fine, but we'll start with Mr. Fiorentino.
Yes, Mr. Hyde, on slide 15, if you could pull that back up for us. So on the slide, I just wanted to clarify, because there's a lot of information that's extremely important. Is this an and or to those 3 points?
This is just a clarification as to when can we actually return all students without having to provide any other accommodations and or needs. When do masks go away? When does the PPE go away? When do the screens go away? When does, we'll never, I don't think, ever completely minimize our cleaning. We've established a new process that I think we're very comfortable with, especially as you head into influenza season. Hopefully it will help us. But this is the definitive ruling on when we will go back to normal as a public school system.
Okay, but it doesn't say that this is the only way we'll go back to our original plan or in-person
No, sir.
teaching and learning.
No, sir. This is just specific to when does everything else go away.
Because I'm personally not overly optimistic that bullet point 2 would happen by October the 9th. So.
I'm willing to wager with you only because I have remained the eternal optimist when it comes to bullet number 2. My team will tell you I am the guy out there championing for a vaccine, a good, safe, viable vaccine. But
Champion all you want, but as a
I think
past
I may lose.
researcher, I don't think October 9th will happen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Is that it? You have any other questions?
Anything else, Mr. Fiorentino?
Thank you.
Mr. Stevens?
I have a few, so please bear with me. First of all, I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure I'm speaking for the rest of the school board as well. It is very obvious to us the effort that the staff has gone through and the confidence of the staff, and I can't say that I could be any prouder of all the staff of this school district and what they're going through and what they're doing on a daily basis without a whole lot of direction. I think that as we have no national direction, we have now no state direction, and I almost think it's planned that way so that you're the bad guy no matter what, and that's how I feel about what's happening with they keep changing. Nobody knows. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with your term. We will update the students. When I asked, will there be a drop-dead decision date for the second quarter, you said you would update students on September 9th. I would like to be able to say that by such and such a date, you'll know, because I think families need to plan.
I think
that
you said
is what
September
was said.
11th.
But you said update. You didn't say decide by.
September, there were dates. September 11th, November 13th.
But what I heard was update information. That doesn't say we will have a decision on the second quarter by. You say update.
Okay.
And I'm not asking you to change it. I'm just saying that we will inform you what's going to happen second quarter by is going to make parents feel more comfortable than an update. An update could just be a status report. You follow what I'm saying?
It says parents and guardians will receive an update regarding the status of our plans for the second 9-week
Okay,
will occur
well,
on
I'm just
September 11th.
telling you as
Certainly.
one person what I saw and what I heard
Certainly.
and how I interpreted it. Same way we remote learned last time, we're remote learning this time, but they're two dramatically different things. I'd like you to call it live remote or something because I think it's dramatically different. And I've had a lot of experience working with groups, and I know people don't read always what's handed to them, so they're going to assume. Activities, when I think of, band, orchestra, choir, I don't know how you're going to do that. I'm not suggesting you make a change. I'm just expressing some concern. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that. I don't know how we're going to be able to have sports. I mean, look at what's happening with professional baseball right now. It started up a couple days ago, and it's ready to shut down again now. I don't know how we do football, basketball, all those things, and I understand we're waiting for IHSA, but I'm not expecting the decisions there are going to be any clearer than they have been from the CDC or the IDPH or the state. So you're going to have to make some tough calls on that one. I'm assuming, this is really a dumb comment, but I'm assuming there's a moratorium on any type of out-of-city, out-of-state travel. That's a given?
That's already been addressed with our schools and our staff. Yes, sir.
Okay. The 4 days plus the one, I like that very much, but I want to ask how many contact hours other than study halls or whatever do students normally have, and do 4 days give you the same level of contact hours of instruction? And have you considered adding an hour to the 4 days so that the fifth day can be used as you want, which I think is excellent. That's, again, just a comment, not expecting you to respond.
Yes, sir.
Our students, you say they're going to have to leave their cameras on. I get involved in a number of Zoom meetings, and in some cases I have a picture and not my real face. Are they going to be allowed to do that?
No.
Okay, I think they need to know that for sure. I think that my recommendation would be that the district and the board in particular adopt a policy that says if any complaint comes in on a teacher and a recording or a video is used to support that complaint, that we would deny it. I don't think we should respond to those at all. It's kind of, to me, it's like an anonymous letter. And I don't want to put our teachers in that kind of a position where they have, I want them to know ahead of time that we're not going to pay attention to a video. I mean, it still has to follow some kind of a normal protocol and not catch them in something that,
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
I would be very upset. And if somebody tries to post a video or something and you know what's going to happen.
Yes, sir.
Are all classes going to be also recorded so that they could watch them again later or not?
Pardon me, sir? Say that one more
Are
time.
all classes going to be recorded so they could be watched later?
That is an ongoing discussion with LEAD. The question is to all classes being recorded every day versus classes that would be recorded based off explicit need is an ongoing conversation because, again, they wouldn't necessarily have to. Let me give you a good example. If I'm teaching an addition problem, I will not have to capture my entire lesson versus I could capture and record a 3 to 5 minute overview of what I'm doing, provide some examples for parents, because really that's what we're talking about is if a parent comes home at the end of the day or is able to work with their children on an assignment that they were issued in class, how do we clarify for that parent and provide supports for them? So that is a conversation that we have ongoing with LEAD.
Okay, but I think it's important for parents to recognize they're not going to have the opportunity to review the whole class later.
Correct.
And that's why the students have to be there and they have to be paying attention.
Now, our teachers, Mr. Stevens, just as a reminder, last year in particular, when teachers were made aware that students would be absent or there was an extenuating circumstance that prevented a student from attending regularly, our teachers were incredibly accommodating through the use of recorded lessons or activities and following up with students after hours. So that would continue as well.
Well, I'm kind of, I'm stealing a line from Mr. Fiorentino here, but the buy-in from the parents and the students is what's going to make this successful or fail. And if students don't participate and show up every day, it's not going to work for that student. And it's unfortunate. And they're not going to have the opportunity to go back and look at a video later.
Yes, sir.
Haiku. I thought haiku was disappearing and you'd replaced it with something.
No, sir. That is actually Haiku was purchased by our current learning management system that we're transitioning to, PowerSchool. So
just changing names?
that is correct.
I see. Thank you. I would like to have assurance that the board would vote again, not only on this plan, but if there is a plan to return them to school. I would like the board to weigh in on that. That's my other comment. And then with regard to this building, how many people are in this building every day, and are they socially distanced?
Yes, sir. We have a little over 100 individuals in this building. We accomplished that through, quite honestly, a lot of us still continue to attend Zoom meetings. As you walk into any one of the conference rooms, you'll notice that there are maximum capacities based off of our ability to
I just
socially
noticed the
distance.
parking lot looked awfully full the last couple of days.
Cars are big.
Yeah.
People are little.
Okay,
That's the best answer I can give you, Mr. Stevens.
that takes care of my comments and questions. Thank you for indulging me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mrs. Lamarca?
Okay, well, I do have a few questions, so bear with me. I don't think any of these are repetitive. I tried to keep up with Joe there. So my first couple of questions, Mr. Hyde, have to do with the daycare options. I don't know if you want to flip back to that slide. And if these are things that I missed, again, I apologize, but I didn't catch this information. So do you have an idea, it doesn't have to be specific at all, but can you give us an idea of how many children at this time you're thinking you can accommodate?
Is it 1336?
I'm not comfortable giving a definitive number. I will tell you it's in a range of anywhere from 450 to almost 600. We are waiting for some of our partners to finalize that with us. But then we are also exploring options on how to flex some of our internal positions to help cover some of those as well.
Okay, so you talked about how that would occur in our buildings. Did I understand that correctly?
That is correct.
So then will that somehow negatively, well, I'm sure you'll plan around that, but I'm just thinking that's a lot more bodies to add to the buildings, and you're going to have your teachers there. So I'm sure you're taking all that into consideration, but I just want to make sure I understood that was the plan.
There are a lot of common spaces in our buildings, such as gymnasiums, multipurpose rooms, cafeterias, all of which became usable spaces in the past. So that's really where Ms. Harkin works her magic and identifies the most viable locations for that to take place.
Okay. And then how will participation in that daycare be figured out? I mean, I like that you said that our staff would have first dibs, for lack of a better term. How, beyond that, I'm assuming that wouldn't take up the whole 450 to 600. I don't know, but I'm assuming it wouldn't. How would you determine the rest of the spaces?
Yeah, so there really depends on right now which partner and which funding source we're talking about. If it's Boys and Girls Club, it's going to be largely dependent and prioritized for Title I families because that's how they derive their funding. And those dollars would have to be spent in service to those students in that community. Other sites, we are looking to utilize some of our Title IV dollars with Park District and other partners that would allow us to provide supervision. And Ms. Lamarca, back to your initial question, just a clarification, because you're aware, our community may not be aware, that half of Perry, or the back quarter of Perry, was converted into an area where students would be able to also come to. So that would pull students out of the rest of our buildings. In addition to which, other partners have other locations, sites where they host summer camp programs and other programs and supervision. So for example, our park district, the Rack House Center and others have sites and facilities as well that might offset some of that need. So the funding source will determine how we prioritize those families. Again, as I pointed out, so if we have 300 spots available for non-Title I families, we would put those families, and we exceeded that demand, we would place them into a lottery. And I think what we would attempt to do is provide some level of care for all children versus just saying, okay, you get 5 days a week and you get nothing. There may be a way to balance that, similar to a hybrid school day option. But again, that's going to take a little bit more for us to finalize. We've been in conversations with our partners now for a little over a week, but there's a lot of logistics on their end that they have to review and get back to us on.
Okay, so my last question about that is, how will the children that are in the daycare setting, how will they be helped for the remote learning? You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
So obviously, I'm not talking about the littles. I'm talking about school-age children.
Correct. So those students, all of our after-school programs and all of our external providers provide tutoring and support after school presently. So they would continue to apply the same supports for students in the class. They're not instructors. I think we'd have to clarify that. But they could support those students. And then again, because some of those are going to be in our facilities, we then have the ability to provide tech support and other supports for those children as they're engaged in their learning. But as part of their daily activities, we'll also be able to provide some breaks and some opportunities, lunch. They may follow more of a traditional school schedule, but we would provide those frequent breaks. Students would still be required to wear masks because it's inside of a school building. That is not something that we can eliminate as a requirement.
Okay. All right. So moving on to the next thing, IHSA, which I know Joe mentioned too, and this is just a question, so please no one freak out, but I'm just wondering if IHSA comes forward and for some reason they don't decide to move sports around, they want to go ahead and continue with the contact sports and pretty much everything. This is more of a logistical question for me because I'm still new. Do we have the right to override that? So if we're, to Joe's point, if we as a board and your recommendation is, you know what, I don't think we should do football this year, let's look at something else. And again, this is just a question, so I don't want any hate mail after this. It's just a question. Can we override that, or is that like we have to abide by that?
That's actually, I had not even considered that question. I'd really have to look into that. I don't know what our current participation and requirements are as an IHSA associated school district are. I'm assuming we have the right to say no without any penalty or concern. I would say that is a conversation and a meeting that I probably will skip.
Okay, all right. I was just curious about that.
I don't think,
so.
we just don't know. And I'd like some time to look into it with Ms. O'Keefe and others to determine what our rights would be.
Right.
And make sure that there wouldn't be any penalty or sanctions in the subsequent years. And I do think that we'd have to have some conversations with our families, because I know that some school districts that have gone out remote continue to allow for extracurriculars and athletics to take place, Stevenson High School and others, because their opinion is it's an elective, it's a choice, and you're pursuing that on your own with a waiver. I think that raises a lot of questions for us, so I think we really do need to wait and see. I'll apprise the board tomorrow of any decision that we hear of.
Okay, and again, I'm in no way saying that we would even
Absolutely.
want to consider that.
No,
I was
it's a
just-
question that needs to be asked.
I have, just as a disclaimer, I have a boys soccer player, high school soccer player, so.
No, it's a very fair question that
I
needs to be
understand.
asked.
So, okay. And next, and I know you had the slide about the pre-meetings or the meetings with the students and the teachers, and I think that's absolutely amazing and awesome, and I think that will just have a lot of value in many respects. However, I'm just wondering, there is no ability for them to do those in person if they choose and if the family is comfortable. I know you mentioned something about cleaning, but I don't really, respectfully, I just don't understand why. Like why they can't come in, sit down, have a quick 5 to 10 minute face-to-face if everybody is okay with it.
Yeah, I think primarily my concern are similar to those that many parents have faced when you go to an open house, even though you're scheduled for a particular time, the conversations in each meeting before you, even if they go 2 minutes over, but if you're the sixth conversation, you're now 12 to 15 minutes late for yours. I think that's part of the concern, is that overlap in our ability to make sure that we can wipe everything down in between meetings. I'm willing to explore that. I'm not opposed to the idea. I just think it's going to take a little bit more discussion and logistics on our end. But we wanted to provide families the assurance that those personal conversations would still take place. But
Yeah,
I will
I
certainly
love that.
explore
Okay.
that and get back to the board.
Okay, and if lunch periods are a sticking point for the middle schools and the high schools, it sounds like mostly the high schools, would we ever look at shortening the day by an hour or so and just doing a grab and go on the lunch?
Yeah, the problem we faced at the high school is the 9-period day and the ability for us to remain as close and approximate that schedule to the best of our ability. So that does become somewhat of a limiting factor. So what we were able to do initially was we moved lunches to either first period or last period of the day to allow students to basically use those as a late start or an early release. So I think we would have to explore that. The grab and go at middle school, is it attainable? The answer is anything's attainable. It's just a matter of how much effort, how much time, how much funding. But I would like to go back and revisit that with my team and provide you with an update in the near future.
Okay, and then for high school PE, I know there's the option out there, and I don't remember what it's called. It's
Flex
where-
PE.
Thank you, that's what it is. It kind of makes sense to me to let the high schoolers, like, all do that if they want to, or because I know that you have to go through like an application process to do
ma'am.
that and things, but can we make that more available for our high school students?
We can. We'd have to work to secure additional telemetry strap devices. For your comfort, and I know you and I have had this conversation about waivers, any waivers that students qualified for the first semester currently will continue to apply regardless of what takes place with sports. We would also, just for the record, I have asked for the possibility of a consideration for an additional waiver for physical education. So for students, as you know, the current waivers for students not to have to participate in PE are spelled out in school code. And they're typically their marching band, their athletics, they're those types of events. We have students who participate in any number of other activities that, quite frankly, in other states would also be exempt and qualify for waivers. So we've asked for some additional consideration for that under these conditions. Could those students who are in Taekwondo, who are in Karate, who are in Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, who are in Capoeira, kids who are in equestrians, are students who are Olympic athletes in skate or gymnasts, those currently aren't always captured in those waivers. And so there is an opportunity for us to expand that definition and allow those students to also meet the exemption criteria, if possible.
Okay, great. Only a couple more questions, I promise. All right,
Yes, ma'am.
could you go to slide number 21? And this just might be me not understanding this, but I don't think I understand the difference between the third and the fourth bullet point.
Okay.
Points.
Your schedule is the list of classes you have by period, right? This is what I have for first period, this is what I have for second period, this is what I have for third period. What will happen in the fourth bullet is their learning schedule, meaning fourth period may actually be first on the day, each day, instead of actually happening in fourth hour, which is what your schedule says it should be. If we did that last year with our e-learning, remote learning, we modified the high school, middle school, and elementary schedules. So it didn't always follow the traditional schedule. Part of that was to ensure kids had 2 core academics and an enrichment each day. So their schedule becomes somewhat convoluted, and that's why we had to provide that printed format to tell parents, today at high school it's an A day, here are the class periods you will follow, because your second period and my second period could be 2 completely different classes.
Okay, so really that just applies to middle school and high school.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And just to, again, clarify, and again, if you did, I just want to double clarify that the teachers will be in their classrooms Monday through Friday, instructing from their classrooms?
That is correct. There are a handful of exceptions that may apply to teachers, in particular those with newborns or infants, because we can't provide access to that care. Those child care opportunities have become incredibly difficult for some of our staff to secure. So we would provide some accommodations for them.
Okay. All right. And my last question is for students that have elected into remote learning, I'm talking, ideally we go back second quarter and following whatever modified plan. But the students that still opt into remote learning in high school, I'm curious, can they opt out of the SAT and PSAT?
The state mandates that they have to take the test.
Okay.
A student can always not attend on a testing date.
Okay.
It's the same as any state assessment. I don't know why a student would opt out of taking the assessment, especially those, I've had some conversations with our students via social media who have said, if I've already paid to take the test, should I still take it again? And the answer is always yes, for two reasons. Number one, the only score that will be reported for the district scores are the ones that are administered on site. So if a student takes the assessment elsewhere and does very well, we don't get credit for that. It only gets credited for the assessment that's administered on site. The second reason is we encourage students to take the assessment, especially in those circumstances. The state's paying for this. Do not turn down an opportunity to super score your SAT.
Yeah.
And super scoring is legitimate, and it's a viable means for students to come in and help improve their prior scores through a combination of different assessment components within this test. So we would always encourage students to take the opportunity for a free test every day.
Okay. All right. That's all I have more of a statement, but I'll let the next person ask their question.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Scarpino, did you have questions?
I don't have any questions because I've spent quite a bit of time with Mr. Hyde on the phone, and he has answered all the questions, and I appreciate the modifications you have made.
Thank you, sir.
So I appreciate it. I have no questions.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mary on the phone. Mary, did you have any questions?
Mary, did you have questions?
No, I really appreciate all the questions of my colleagues. They helped clarify everything.
Okay, thank you. Nancy, do you have any questions?
I do not. Same reason.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of follow-up questions. On my first comment is, as in any field, there are certain terminologies that are unique to that field. And within education, we're using the terms synchronous, asynchronous days. I've been around for a while, and it took me for a little bit to figure that out. So I think it's important that we define those terms so parents can understand them.
Yes, ma'am.
And going along those lines of the 4 synchronous days, which are 4 teaching days, and then the 5th day. For elementary, I understand everything that we had for high school, middle school. For elementary school, trying to reach out to parents that are working, that are not available during the day, has there been talk about how that's going to work for staff, for elementary staff? Is it possible that instead of that whole Friday, and I understand it's not up to us to give these solutions, so I'm just using this by way of an example, for those elementary teachers to use that time throughout the week instead in order to reach parents that are working parents, because I'm making the conclusion that when you say teachers will reach out to students, if you're talking about a second grade student and reaching out, that it may also include reaching out to the parent as
Correct.
well, or making
Correct.
sure that that student is available. So I'm wondering if there's can be some modification that's there for elementary teachers to be able to reach parents that are working parents.
The answer is yes,
Okay.
and that would probably be largely addressed through a slight modification in their daily schedule. The importance of the Friday as well is not only for that teacher follow-up, but to provide our interventionists with dedicated days and times in which they can also support students. And so interestingly enough, not to complicate the conversation any further, but it's going to get complicated, that 4-day schedule with Friday asynchronous, meaning students are typically assigned work or scheduled for appointments to interact with various staff might look different by grade level. It might be a Monday for one group, it might be a Tuesday for another group, it might be a Wednesday for a third group. Because again, we've got to provide that flexibility in the schedule for our interventionists to work with students without pulling them out of core instruction. And I think that's part of the ongoing discussion. To your question in particular, I think that's part of your response, which is interventionists will be there to help support and nurture students along the way as well. But I think to your question about will teachers have time throughout the week, I do believe that there's an opportunity to modify the daily schedule that would provide that time for teachers through planning and other opportunities for them to reach out on a daily basis.
Okay. And sticking with the topic of the elementary students, we talked about the daycare that we could possibly provide and how there would be support services for those students during the day. For students that have other daycare providers other than what we have, and that they are not home because they have parents that are working, and so they are at a daycare, that may not be supportive of having them do their, and I'm talking, elementary school.
Yes, ma'am.
1st through 5th.
Yes, ma'am.
If those lessons are not recorded by the teachers, are there ways, or what have you considered as being the options for those students to be able to get their education?
There are minimal options right now to address that, because that is an ongoing conversation that I have to continue to have with LEAD. And unfortunately, I'm just not comfortable providing a definitive answer. And it's not like me. It's out of character,
No, but
as you know.
that's fine, and I understand. And I expect that this is going to continue to be ongoing conversations between you, your administration, and we modifying and going along with this.
Yes, ma'am.
I think it's important along those lines that we let the community parents know that what we see here is the basis of the plan, and that there will be tweaks to this even as it is implemented, and as time goes on, it will be modifiable, and it will evolve into more of a, it'll look differently, but more independently user-friendly, that will be different for maybe each teacher, each classroom. Because one of my concerns back on the elementary and the daycare is those single parents and not wanting to increase a divide between our lower economic students, where parents, maybe it's a single parent, parents that need to work, don't have daycare, don't then get into the daycare provided by us, and yet, what do we do with their children?
I am excited by the conversations that are taking place behind closed doors right now. I will tell you that the ideas are, there is no more box. I am thoroughly impressed. I am very impressed by the ideas and the concepts being brought forward as to how we can address that. And they're not just, so when I refer to my team, I should be very careful to also include, to the greatest extent possible, our collective bargaining units, who have been through thick and thin with us, and the burden on all of us has been incredible. How do I represent the interests and needs of 21,000 students, potentially 50,000 parents, right? And each one of our collective bargaining units then has the unenviable task of having to somehow represent and manage the specific and individual interests of their entire membership group. It's impossible, right, to reconcile everyone's mutual interests and meet their individual needs all the time. But it is something we all work towards. But I will say that even the ideas coming forward from our collective bargaining units are exciting. So I will not say more than that. And typically I have a bad habit of throwing some of our union presidents under the bus in meetings, because we have these informal conversations. I get excited and I throw it out there for the board and community, and I put them in a bad spot. I will not do that tonight. But I will tell you there are some incredibly innovative and exciting ideas that we're working on that may allow us to focus on returning some students to school faster than we initially anticipated.
And I think as far as for tonight, that suffices for what my concern is. And I will admit that I don't have doubt that you have already been considering this, but information that is between you and I isn't out there in the public. So I do want people
Yes,
to
ma'am.
understand that these are things that are being
ma'am.
considered. And I do think, along with what you were saying, I'm reminded of what we were told by our collective bargaining units at our last meeting. And again, I think I was reminded of it, I don't know, was it just yesterday? When I was told, remember, we're all in this together. So we are all in this together. And that just takes different, forms every day. But it's nice to know that we are all in this together. Speaking of being all in together, I do have a staff question. We talked about staff, meaning teachers are going to be in their classrooms teaching. You mentioned staff that may be able to be home, those with newborns, younger children. What about staff that are immunocompressed or compromised that maybe have a child that are those things that are also being considered? And I see Mr. Mora shaking his head, indicating to me that we are not leaving staff behind on this, that they are just as important safety-wise as our students. The two are not mutually exclusive. We're going to be looking at them on a one-on-one basis. And for those that are on the phone or that cannot see because maybe the cameras don't point this way, Mr. Mora from HR is nodding, saying that this is not something that is not being addressed. Not saying that it is going to be coming up with a solution that will please everyone, but we are not overlooking it. Okay. And I won't think that pretty much covers most of my specific questions. So I am going to just take one more look here. When we're talking daycare, and we're working with the Boys and Girls Clubs, and we're talking with the Park District, I think I heard you mention that there may be facilities that we're looking at holding daycare other than ours, like at the Park District facilities themselves?
Correct. Some of them have their own facilities that we could support.
Okay, all right. And then also, as I'm back on the daycare thing, for daycare, you did mention the difference between if we have Title I students and non-Title I students, so that we are addressing the needs of those lower income students as far as daycare, as we're looking at our lotteries. Okay, so maybe I wasn't clear on that question.
I'm sorry, say that again?
You mentioned that there's Title I funding that can be used for daycare.
For Title I eligible families.
Yes, that was my point right
ma'am.
there. So Title I eligible families will be the ones that can use the Title I funding.
That is correct.
And so we are looking to address Title I students' needs.
Correct. And Title IV dollars would potentially cover supports for other families.
Okay. All right, so then I am going to start with Mr. Fiorentino. We're going to go back around and see if anyone wants to make some closing comments.
Yes, I do. Closing comments, I'd like to thank again Mr. Hyde and the entire staff, and really all the team members for the thorough and thoughtful presentation, because I know a lot went into this, and Mr. Hyde was the representative, but there was an awful lot of people working on these 30-something slides. I'd like to state that I did not think 2 weeks ago we'd be changing a well-thought-out plan that was approved by this board. I was in favor of a very safe but aggressive reopening of our schools in a hybrid form of teaching and learning at that time. However, I applaud this district for modifying this plan due to the multiple factors that were highlighted tonight by Mr. Hyde since the July 14th meeting. Now, for those in the audience and online, I encourage you all to review the July 14th meeting and note the challenging and comprehensive discussion we all had. As we had mentioned, though, it was only a plan and nothing was really absolute. So based on local data and all that is going on around us, this previous plan needed to be changed and updated to fulfill our goal of keeping our students and staff health and wellness the priority as we reopen. Maybe we could have waited, but I supported proceeding with a timely decision to best suit the needs of students, families, teachers, and the staff. So the work is not done with this meeting, as there will be countless hours of intense preparation by our educators and staff to continue to improve the virtual format and fulfill our teaching and learning objectives to deliver a rigorous education at all levels and all ages. To that end, I ask the community to be kind, and I ask the community to be patient with our educators. This is new and not without great challenge. Please continue to provide us feedback and let us know what is working and what needs to be improved. Serious consideration to joining us at our virtual town halls over the next 3 days. And in conclusion, school is only delayed by 2 days. Things will look different and feel very different until hopefully October 9th. We are taking a more cautious approach for a short period of time to increase our chances of providing educator-student contact in our far preferred manner for the majority of the academic year. I, along with the administration, remain committed to finding ways to return students and staff to in-person instruction as soon as we believe it to be safe. Thank you.
Mr. Stevens.
I do not have a statement, but I have another basic logistics question. When the board was meeting by Zoom, you treated us all as if we were technological dummies, which was wonderful. So we only had to push a button and we were in the meeting. Are you going to do a similar thing for all these students? And they have to sign out and sign in every class, right?
So students who were in our school system last year are very familiar with the process.
Okay, so I shouldn't worry about it.
New families and students will receive training and videos and lots of support. Yes, sir.
Are you extending the times between classes so that they can sign out and sign in?
It really is not a protracted process, but yes, we adhere to their transition. We're not providing additional time. We provide transition time. Yes, sir. That's also where we built in breaks for children for our students, I should say, across all grade levels to run to the restroom, do the things they need to take care of as well.
Right. I knew you would. I just had to ask the question.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, I just have to say, wow. I think like most of us, I've been paying a lot of attention to the other school districts and what they're doing and looking at, what maybe I thought, wow, that was a great idea, or wow, I wish we would have thought of that. And I think all of us have been doing that to a certain extent. But I just have to say, this is my opinion, that this is the most comprehensive, robust plan I've seen. And I love the fact that it takes into consideration so many facets of so much. I'm thoroughly impressed. So thank you, Mr. Hyde and your team. You've knocked it out of the ballpark with this, I think. And again, I understand, and I totally echo Mr. Fiantino when he says that this will only be as successful as the parents and the students' participation, enthusiasm behind that participation, and of course, our wonderful educators. And this is still, and I completely acknowledge that this still places a lot at their feet. And I want to echo Mr. Fiantino too and ask parents and guardians to continue to be kind and show grace to those educators as they figure this all out. So in that, I just want to say I love the daycare piece. I think that it not only meets the needs of our staff, but it addresses our Title I students and other parents at home that need that support. I love the integration of the one-on-one virtual meetings. I think that's outstanding. It's really fantastic and will hold a lot of value. I love the integration of the in-person services for our special needs students. I haven't seen that echoed in any other plans, so I think that's just outstanding. And then the opportunity for the extracurriculars. I mean, I know we have to be creative with that, and we have to be very careful, and this goes beyond just athletics and what IHSA comes down with, but just, you know, the fall plays and the clubs and all of that. If we can get creative and find a way to let those students be on campus safely and participate at some level in those activities, I just think that just will be an outstanding opportunity for those students to bloom in those areas. And I want to end by saying, to me, the most responsible part of this plan is that we are committing to looking at it again and chopping, and for lack of a better word, chopping it up in 9 weeks instead of saying we're just going to be out for the whole first semester. And realistically, that may happen. We all know it may happen. But I like that we are committed to continuing the process, continuing to look at things. And we're still, I think, with the dates that Mr. Hyde has put forth, we're still giving parents and guardians plenty of time to plan and figure out what happens in that next 9 weeks. So overall, I just want to say well done, and I am wholeheartedly in support of this new revised plan.
Thank you.
Dr. Scarpino.
COVID-19 has created trying times for everyone. These trying times are evident here in District 300 as parents, students, employees, administration, and board members wrestle with ever-changing data, guidelines, and conditions regarding the start of the new school year. As a result, many individuals are communicating with the board and expressing their opinions as to what should or should not be done regarding the start of the school year. I have read, and I am confident my fellow board members have read every single email, and we have taken to heart everything that the people have said. I now respectfully ask you to listen to my comments. As chairperson of the Construction Facility Oversight Committee, CFOC, one of the duties I assumed is to visit all the schools that are undergoing various construction projects. Since July 21st, I visited 10 schools. During each visit, I converse with office personnel, custodial, buildings and grounds personnel, principals, and assistant principals. Additionally, during these visits, I have conferred with parents, students, and employees in various parking lots, spoken to neighbors who have children and grandchildren in our district, because I want to hear and understand the concerns of the people. In addition to the health and safety concerns expressed by everyone, the following questions have been consistent. Which back-to-school scenario is correct? Is one better than the other? Why is one better than the other? What does each student gain by having this or that type of instruction? Or what does each student stand to lose by having this or that type of instruction? What are the drawbacks of this or that type of instruction? What impact does not being in school have on the students? What impact does having students in school have on teachers and students? Is it possible that students may not be in school for in-person instruction for the entire school year? Every school district superintendent and Board of Education across the United States is wrestling with what to do with the start of the school year. I ask you, just look in a 5 or 10 mile radius of District 300, and you will see differing ways public, private, and parochial school districts are approaching this challenge. No one knows for certain which plan is the best. All superintendents and boards of education across America know is that they are making these difficult decisions based upon the data and conditions that are presented to them by various local, state, and federal agencies for their specific geographic location. What I do know is that life goes on. It doesn't stop. We all make decisions each and every day, some good, some not so good, some involving more risk than others. However, at what point does risk become too great? As I said on July 14th, unfortunately, there is not a one-size-fits-all solution that everyone can agree upon to these unique challenges. However, there is one thing I can say with full confidence and conviction: there is no substitute for in-person teacher instruction in the classroom. With all that said, taking into consideration the recommendation of our superintendent and the presentation this evening, I am in total support of his recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, on the phone, did you have any comments you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just want to say, to take this opportunity to say thank you to Fred and all of his staff. I know that they have been working around the clock to make the best reality possible for our students. Unfortunately, it's turned out that the best reality possible that we have is remote, at least for the start of our school year. But I know that making this decision now is going to give our teachers the time that they need to make our remote programming as good as it can be. And I truly have faith in every single person who works for the district that we are going to come together and make this the best opportunity it is that's possible for our students. So thank you again, Fred, your entire staff. I know how hard you've been working. And I'm really proud that we tried to put together a plan to come together in person. And I know that it'll be really useful for us when we are able to return in person.
Thank you. Nancy?
Yes. Hold on. I also want to, the good thing about being and the bad thing about being last is there's not a whole lot left to say, except I do want to thank Fred, his team, every single educator in District 300, the kids, a lot of the high school kids who have stepped up and have given suggestions, the parents, and every stakeholder in this district. This is something that affects every single one of us. And so far, I think we've been dealing with it in a very mature and professional way, as well as doing it through, while we're searching through and working through a lot of personal feelings, a lot of feelings of fear. I know I'm afraid that every decision I make is going to impact some people great and some people not so great, and it's one of those decisions that weighs on us heavily, but we're able to make those decisions using the best possible information that's out there, or at least an acknowledgement that the information that's out there is something that it's really hard to use to make a decision one way or the other. So we're defaulting and making sure that we're protecting every single person that is in our schools or could be in our schools, their health and safety, and giving our kids the best possible education we can under the circumstances while protecting everybody. So thank you again to Fred and his team and everybody else who's been involved in this, from the kids on up through the administration and the parents. And am supportive of going into this, starting out in remote so we can see what's coming. Because even though we are learning more and more about this virus every day, the only thing we really know about it is a serious threat and one that we cannot take lightly. And we have to move slowly and see what's coming, because every single day it seems like there's a new challenge. So I'm very confident that we're making the right decision tonight. I'm also very confident and on our team, and I know that we will always get the best possible information and the best possible choices to make the difficult decisions we have to make. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a few comments. I do also want to thank Fred, his staff, Mike, Michelle, and also your families for giving us you and your time. Your time is not something that you ever get back. You can always work on getting your health back or earnings back, but you don't get your time back. So I appreciate your families and you for doing everything that you've done for this district. Fred, there aren't many times when I have to be talked off the ledge. There's not many times when I have to be told, oh, okay, take a deep breath. And I think some of the comments that were back and forth, maybe, the National Guard part was a little bit over the edge. But I do thank you for your patience in getting me off the ledge and saying, oh, okay, take a deep breath. That was good. Thank you. I have to tell you, though, I don't like the plan. And the reason I don't like the plan is because I want normal. I want our kids to be back in the classroom. I want our teachers in the classroom teaching. I want things to be normal. And it is very difficult for me to accept that there is no normal. That way of education is going to be a long time from coming back. And, like I said at the last meeting, maybe we need to toss it all out the window and come up with our all-new plan. With that aside, though, out of that I don't like the plan because I don't like that we have to have a plan, I think it's a very well thought out plan. I think it's going to constantly be changing. Our plan on the 14th was a great plan as well. As Mary pointed out, that may be the plan that we're able to use at some point when we start to implement going back into the classroom. I have a lot of faith, a lot of confidence in your team and our teachers, our paras, everyone, because this is going to take everyone to make this work. And as so many of my colleagues have pointed out, there's going to be bumps along the road, but I go back to we're all in this together. That keeps resonating with me. I have to say I am filled with anger and I'm filled with fear. And what makes it even more frustrating is there is no focus for me to, no place for me to focus that anger and fear. There's no place that I can say I can blame, that I can argue with to say, what did you do to our children? What did you do to our education system? But the flip side of that is I can say to you, and I can say to you, and to Mike, and to everyone here, that because of you, I know that anger, that upheaval in our system, you've got the best interest of our staff and our students, and everyone will come out of this. I remind our community about the strength of community. This would not be the first time that our community became active. This is not the entity, this is not the group that has control over CDC guidelines, IDPH, ISBE, whatever acronym you want to come up with. There are those groups out there, and I would encourage parents, community members, to focus their energies, if they want to become active, to those agencies, to tell them to get their act together, to give us the proper guidelines we need, and to give us the support so that we can do what they're telling us they want us to do. So, yes, I don't like it, but I think it's the best. I think it's an excellent plan. I think we have the best staff. I think one of the most telling slides was they say this and then they say this. So I'm going to take a little bit of leeway here, and I'm going to end my comments on a little bit of a humorous note, because I think humor is going to get us through this as well. Throughout this process, mainly the last couple of days, this little ditty from when I was a little kid keeps playing back over in my mind, and this is how I feel where we are right now. So it's totally unrelated to education, unrelated to the plan, very much related to we don't know what's going on. And it goes something like this. And I say something because I'm not sure if I remember it correctly. It was a while ago. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I come before you to stand behind you, to tell you something I know nothing about. This Thursday, which is Good Friday, there'll be a men's meeting for women only. Admission free, pay at the door. Grab a seat, sit on the floor. Our next attraction will be at the four corners of the round table. To me, that sort of signifies what we're running up against. It's this, but it's this. And since we can't count on this or this, we count on what we know, and what we know is our staff, our community, and our parents. So thank you, Fred.
Yes, ma'am.
And you answered all of my questions, too. And, of course, if I have any more, you can talk me off the ledge again.
Actually, that's the story you should have told.
No, because I could just...
So I'll tell it, because Ms. Miller wanted to bring the National Guard in to supervise students.
Well, there were...
But that was after multiple conversations and multiple iterations.
And that was where, when I got to, we were discussing an option, and the stumbling block in the option was on supervision, and that's when I said, fine,
Correct.
just get the National Guard in.
Correct.
Okay, do we,
We do have public participation.
do we have public participation in person? Mr. Williamson, it looks like.
Oh, I apologize. If the union leadership would please come to the podium.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
He got waylaid with the whole National Guard bit.
Good evening, Mr. Hyde, District 300 Board of Education and community members. As always, I want to thank everyone that has been working relentlessly on the ever-changing plans as we near the beginning of the school year. My name is Amy Moreno. I am not only here as DESPA president, but also as a 23-year district employee and a parent. Nothing has prepared us for this pandemic. However, we've worked so hard to do the right thing for our employees, students, and families. As I stated at the last board meeting, I'm fully supporting the new and updated plan as presented. We know that there is no perfect plan. The presented updates make the most sense under the current conditions and following and meeting the ever-evolving guidelines. I personally would want my child physically in school with his peers and teachers. However, I also know the importance of following the guidelines that have been given to us. Hope. As stated by Rick Miller, hope is a compass needed to navigate us through these troubled times. By understanding hope as a cognitive function rather than an emotional response, new opportunities present themselves in ways that were previously unimaginable. The science of hope has revealed its DNA. Hope is made of goals, pathways to those goals, and agency required to pursue goals. I have hope that we will persevere through all this. I choose hope by staying positive and leading by example. During this time, many are very fearful of the unknown. The frontal lobe of our brain controls emotions, problem solving, memory, language, and judgment. Fear can interfere with that important part of our brain and limits us to be creative. We need to be creative right now. We need to be positive right now. And we need to confront our fears so we can move together as one. We are all going to May together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Hyde, community, and staff. My name is Michelle Meyer, DESA President, Paraeducators of District 300. As I said at the last board meeting, we are all in this together, and I support this updated plan. Our main focus is the well-being of the children, making sure they are supported emotionally and academically, supporting the families to make sure they know we are there for them and their children, supporting each other as staff, be it moral support, emotional support, technical support, sounding board support, and just being a presence to help where we can. We are all in this together: teachers, paraeducators, secretaries, custodians, bus drivers, lunchroom staff, counselors, social workers, nurses, and administration. Everybody, including the students and families. We are going to have to work harder than ever before to make sure of one thing: the children, families, staff in District 300 are supported and safe, and the children receive the best possible education we can give them during these trying times. Thank you to Mr. Hyde, everyone on our daily 8 o'clock morning meetings, to Amy and Mike for being a phone call away, and the DESA Executive Board, Carolyn, Deb, and Sharon, for your flexibility in meeting on weekends and at a moment's notice, and for all the collaboration and being able to problem solve to best support everyone concerned, and for keeping us all safe. While tonight's decision may answer questions DESA members had, others may come up. Be assured that I will continue to take them to administration so we can problem solve through all of them. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Mike Williamson, 8300 President. Do you still want my address, or can I skip that?
No, I think you can skip
Oh,
that.
thanks,
And,
Amy.
and I won't hold you to the 5 minutes
Yeah,
either.
well, that's good, because I was just going to run over if you put it up there, so.
And I won't pull out your mic either.
Oh, you can do that from up there?
No, I can't.
Oh. I was just checking on Jason. Okay,
I got
so.
signals.
Yeah. So I came up here a couple of weeks ago, and I was hoping that everybody would hear something that I said, and that it would be the most important part of what I said, and that was what we were doing was a start, and that it would likely change. And I think we were all a little astounded that it changed this much, this quickly. But I also think if you look at the sort of the atmosphere in the whole area, it's changing this much, this quickly. And I can't tell you the number of the times I've had a phone call with Mr. Hyde on a Sunday evening or on a Saturday morning, as we realized that something again had changed, that some fact we had based what we were doing on shifted and became not a fact, or became a different fact that didn't work in the same way. And at a certain point, I think we all kind of looked at each other on these big teams that are doing all this work and went, this isn't going to happen. Not the way we thought it was. There are too many questions. The questions are too hard to answer. The stretching that we have to do to reach for the thing we're reaching for isn't going to happen. And both my colleagues, Amy and Michelle, who have just done the most incredible job of supporting everybody in this district, and by being flexible, by being cognizant of everything that could happen, by looking out for every stakeholder group, not just our own, because that's the problem. You can't just say, this is what works for my one group of people. You have to keep looking at, well, that works, but then what about this? But then what about this? But then what about this? Because ultimately, we all have to look out for each other. Ultimately, we have to go after hope. Ultimately, we have to be there to support each other, because otherwise we don't all get through this, and it's necessary that we all get through it. And so I go back to, here's a start. A place that I strongly believe is the right place for us to be. A place that I have worked for weeks to try to discover, is this the right place? Is this where we should be going? And then, I don't know, what was it, midway last week, Fred? Where did we get to? When did we all just start going, oh? That moment when you're just like, too many things, the cards are going to fall. We got to that point, and then it became, how do we do this? And there are pieces of this that aren't done yet. And I think what I want everybody to hear is the reason for that is because things shift so quickly that we're still working on the remote learning schedules. We're still trying to get those right. Why? Because we had to get all this other stuff right so we could put this forward. There are going to be questions that are unanswered, and we're working on that all day, every day, to get all that done. But here we are in a place where I feel like we can say we're keeping people safe. Here we are in a place where I feel like we can say all of my members who are called on to be educators, because that's what education is. It's a calling. It's not a job. It's a calling. Susie were here, she'd be shaking her head yes.
I'm sure she's listening.
Yeah. Susie, you can text me later and tell me if I got that. Oh, she just did. Okay. It's a calling. And I will tell you right now that it doesn't matter if I am in the classroom or through the Zoom room, I am still called to improve every kid's abilities that I come into contact with. And I can say that about my membership. And I can say firmly about my membership, not all of us are sure exactly how to do this. Not all of us are sure exactly where to be. Not all of us are sure what the best way to address this giant changing situation is. But we're all called to the field of education to educate the students in this district, and we are all going to make this happen. We're here because our kids are here. And if here means through the Zoom room, because it is the best way to get at a situation that is literally impossible otherwise, then that's what we're here to do. Strongly agree with this plan. I strongly agree that it's where we got when we realized that all of the pieces didn't work the way we had set them. We know that we're going to have to be measured, and I said that last time as well. We're going to have to be measured about the way we do things. So looking forward, we have to keep assessing and say, is there a time when we can start to come back? Is there a place where we say we still have to keep doing this the way we're doing it now? Okay? We have to keep looking at those things. And that's exactly what this sets us up to do. It puts us in a place where we can say, where are we at now? We still need to do remote. Where are we at now? Well, we might be able to be reintroducing people back in. The problem solving is constant, and we'll keep doing it. I'm answering the questions now already with people that have specifics they want to know about. That's perfect. That's what we should be doing. Amy said it earlier. We're all going to May together. I have no idea what that trip looks like, but I know we're going to get there. And I know we're going to do that together. And I know that, and I need to take a second. Michelle thanked her team, and I should thank mine. So I have taken away this summer of Julie Kreppel, Julie Voss, Tom Domans, Lisa Harris, Pam Johnson, Kendra Crail, Erica Kyle, Mike Block, and probably 30 or 40 others that we've been dragging into things. Okay, I've taken away those people's summer in order to make this happen. And I think tonight we really got somewhere. I think we really figured out this is the way we can do this. And I know it's going to be a struggle for a lot of people, a lot of community members, a lot of whatever. This is a struggle. It's a new thing to solve. But that's the problem with COVID, is we're always solving a new set of just came up. So I also applaud the district and my team for working on options like childcare, both for staff and for community members, and figuring out how do we make this work, because that's what we're all committed to. So anyway, thank you for the trust you put in us, and I guess here I'm talking to the board, but I'm also talking to the community. Thank you for the trust you have put in us and the trust you are putting in us to fulfill that calling that we're here to do, because we can get there. We're all going to May together. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Hyde, did you have?
Yes, ma'am. Madam President, we do have 6 total submissions that came in electronically. If you'll give me one moment. My glasses are being replaced, so I'm going to have to try and enlarge this. The first message came in from Laura Strebler. Our daughter Maggie will be attending kindergarten at Eastview Elementary in the multi-needs special education classroom. Our daughter is a severely developmentally delayed, nonverbal, and receives occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and vision services, in addition to being in one of the neediest classrooms in the district. While we have absolutely nothing but positive things to say about her teachers and therapists, she has made so much progress with them at school. We were overall completely disappointed with e-learning. Our daughter should have attended ESY as well, but virtual learning is not an option for her given her developmental delays and difficulty attending to the computer for learning. She missed out on 60 hours of summer school, which included 120 minutes of direct speech and language services, 60 minutes of direct occupational therapy, 30 minutes of direct physical therapy, and 80 minutes of direct vision therapy. While I understand that March through May of 2020 was a completely unprecedented time, if our daughter continues with e-learning, we are fearful that she will continue to regress and lose any progress that was attained in her preschool years. We hope that the district will ensure that the most vulnerable populations of students who rely on receiving their services in least restrictive setting will attend school. If remote learning is issued for all students, our daughter stands to miss out on 204 minutes of weekly educational services as outlined in her IEP. These minutes are not easily replaced in a remote learning environment. Nothing replaces in-person therapeutic services. As parents of a daughter with severe developmental delay, it is our job to ensure that she has a right to the services outlined in her IEP. Thank you for listening to our concerns. Just a brief response. I will have Ms. Nackey follow up with the family. As I shared this evening, we are committed to finding a way to bringing those students back so they will receive ongoing daily supports to the greatest extent possible. We also agree that the process that we were forced to implement last year does not satisfy our mutual interest in supporting students of this nature, and we realize the burden and the concern it puts on our parents. So Ms. Nackey and I will be following up with the family. The second submission is from Ms. Melissa Hartley. As a parent of 2 District 300 students, one entering 3rd and one entering 5th grade, I have been nothing but impressed with the district thus far. That is why the decision to reopen schools fully for K through 8 seems so out of character. While I understand there's a lot of community pushback to get kids back in school, I would hope you continue to keep the safety of all staff and students at the forefront of your decision making. For example, my 5th grader had 31 students in his class last year. With the room sizes in his school, that would require over 50% of parents to opt for remote learning to make the classroom safe for returning students and teachers. Because I'm not willing to take that gamble, I've already submitted the opt-out form to enroll both my children in remote learning. I am hoping that you've been reconsidering your options for starting the school year fully remote. While I understand how difficult that makes things for many families, it is the most responsible decision to make to keep the students and staff of District 300 safe. And we will provide a follow-up to Ms. Hartley as well. Third message is from Alexander Falls. I am deeply concerned to hear that District 300 is considering reopening schools for this fall. As a new member of District 300, I'm worried about the well-being and safety of both our children and this district's educators. Also, as a former educator, I know both how stretched the school districts are for space, teachers, and substitutes, and cannot imagine young children diligently wearing masks for long days at school. Some logistical issues I see are, do the classrooms have appropriate space for social distancing built in? Has money been allocated to increase cleaning supplies and additional cleaning that would need to take place? As the school day, I believe the intent was, has the school day been lengthened for in-between class clearings or children washing their hands? How are the children going to eat at school safely? And what happens when, not if, someone gets sick? With social tracing policies, everyone who that child came into contact with would need to quarantine. That's multiple classrooms of children and teachers per case, which could potentially shut down large parts of the school per case. Are the parents expected to find accommodations for the children last minute every time someone gets sick? Do we have the substitutes to accommodate teachers who get sick? With the number of Illinois COVID cases being higher now than when they were when schools closed in the spring, I cannot imagine any way to reopen the schools in a way that would guarantee the safety of everyone involved, and I cannot in good conscience endorse any plan for reopening that puts our children's lives in danger. I would rather have our kids learning remotely from home than to have an in memoriam section in our yearbooks. Again, we will provide a response. Public participation submission number 4, Brandy K. With or without a delay in the start of the school year, will the board be considering an extended school year? Considering the loss of in-person learning for the 1921 through 21 school year, and assumably for the 2020-2021 year, I know there's going to be a rather large percentage of children not meeting the mark, and remote learning just isn't sufficient for them, my 504 child being one of them. An extended school year may allow these children to catch up somewhat to eventually get on the mark, even if it was remote learning. Would shortening holiday breaks be considered? Thanksgiving break, less in-service, and half days. Thank you. I will provide a response to that in the future because I know that learning loss is a concern that has been expressed, and we do have an outline as to how that's going to be addressed. But I will also follow up with Ms. Nackey, with Ms. Kay, to address her concerns specifically, since she mentioned her child has a 504. Submission number 5, Matthew Thomas. Good evening, District 300 board members and community. My name is Matthew Thomas. I attended D300 schools for the entirety of my K-12 education and graduated from Jacobs in 2015. Currently, I'm enrolled in graduate school for social work at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I'm aware of and respect the importance of COVID-19 and its need to be discussed as the school year is closely approaching. However, I'm writing tonight to remind the board as well as the entire community that there is another pandemic that has plagued schools across the country and around the world, but most importantly has plagued the schools within District 300. This pandemic has been written within policies. It has been taught through norms, and it's been embedded in many staff morals, beliefs, and teachings. Racism is beyond unacceptable in any form, yet remains alive and festers in District 300. Rather than sharing the ideal outcome of graduating high school followed by college and finally succeeding a successful career, students of color are set up to fail from the very beginning. Racism is taught in early education through children's books, filled primarily with pictures of white characters and heroes, and through teachers' racial biases, which result in students of color being punished disproportionately. These staff and educator biases continue and grow worse into the middle school and high school, where law enforcement officers prey upon students of color. When a student is disproportionately punished, why would they want to keep coming back when they feel as though they cannot win? When a student no longer feels wanted, recruitment officers are strategically placed to benefit these students' struggles. The curriculum and education itself embodies white supremacy and white nationalistic ideals. It's obvious that racism is woven throughout the school curriculum. Why are students taught of July 4th, 1776, but never taught of June 19th, 1965? Why are historic heroes 99% white? Why is the recent and modern day racism never mentioned throughout the history classes? Why are the vast majority of history classes taught by strict conservatives? Being a white male, I come from a more privileged background, and sadly it was not until after leaving District 300 that I truly began to learn the impact historical racism has had and continues to have on people of color today. Being that the District 300 student body is somewhat diverse, 48% white, 38% Hispanic, and 6% black, it is devastating there has been a complete lack of seriousness around the subject of racial inequity. The staff and teacher demographics are not representative of the student body whatsoever. Over 90% of the teachers are white. When there are multiple schools within District 300 that are majority Hispanic, it's absolutely unacceptable to have less than 6% of teachers being Hispanic. How can students feel they belong in a school where nearly none of their leaders look like them or speak their primary language? How can teachers understand the struggles of their students when they do not share the same backgrounds and cultures? The results of these inconsistencies are tragic and heartbreaking. Dundee Crown, the only minority high school in the district, is ranked nearly 7,000th in the country compared to Jacobs being nearly 3,000th and Hampshire being 4,000th, both of which are majority white students. It is no question why Dundee Crown is ranked so much lower. These inconsistencies are even clearer when you look at the SAT results. Standardized tests such as SAT, ACT, ISAT, etc. have all been shown to be racially biased in favor of white individuals. The content within the tests is heavily geared towards white culture and white norms. Jacobs, with a primarily white population, scored in the 78th percentile in the SAT. Hampshire, with a primarily white population, scored the 83rd percentile, while Dundee Crown, a primarily Hispanic population, was in the 37th percentile. The nearly 40% percentile difference is not a coincidence when the populations at Jacobs and Hampshire are disproportionately white. The pandemic of racism cannot wait for a cure. There's a lot of work that must be done and goes much deeper than just having conversations. Policies must be changed, teachers and staff need to be held accountable for their actions, and curriculum must be reinvented completely. I demand that the subject of racial inequity within education be at the top of the future board meeting agendas. With respect to the submission, while the board does not comment, I would encourage this individual, Mr. Thomas, to go back and observe some of our prior board meetings and our commentary as to the strategies that we are taking to address that issue. The final submission is from Ms. Jennifer Green. I think elementary schools should go back in person and wear masks. This is the original plan by the superintendent. Yes, I have concerns with getting COVID, but it's what's best for kids. The kids need to be in school to fully grow academically and socially. I like that Mr. Hyde gave elementary parents the option to do in-person or e-learning. How can teachers say we cannot go back, but so many essential workers, daycares, and other companies have gone back to work? I think the original back-to-school plan is the right decision, and thank you. I would like to provide just a point of clarification. And it's always been my concern that if at any point in my presentation I mentioned staff, I would give the false impression that this change was in any way influenced or pushed by staff. That is not the case. You know, even a survey that was conducted by LEAD indicates that there was pretty much an even split amongst our employees as far as returning in person and equally returning in a remote option. The legitimacy of concerns is valid. While COVID does not adversely, or to the extent as it does adults, does not negatively impact children as severely, I've seen other posts where somebody says, well, the mortality rate for children is much lower. I think we would all agree that we don't want to have a child within that statistic regardless of what the chances are. And I think what oftentimes gets lost in the conversation is, again, children may be somewhat protected from this. Adults are not. Over 30% of my employee workforce are in high-risk circumstances, either due to their age or pre-existing conditions. I do not pretend to know everyone's medical conditions. I do know that based on the submissions and requests that we received to HR, that is a fact. Our teachers, I will tell you, if we told them that they had to come to work, they will come to work. I have that confidence. This is not being pushed by teachers. Our staff have been incredibly flexible, incredibly receptive. They have been very vocal about some of their concerns, but this is not related to our staff. I do not want people to have that impression. I do not like when I hear people comment or I read posts that say teachers are lazy. They're just going to mail these assignments in like they did last year. And I apologize sincerely for those families that had a very poor e-learning experience. However, that was not the experience shared by all. And that is not my absolute personal promise here, and I believe I could put anybody in this room on the spot. We are committed to ensuring that that is not replicated. We are committed to ensuring that there's actual instruction taking place. It's meaningful, it's relevant, and it's rigorous. And again, we want parents to communicate with us if that's not the case, because we will then provide supports to ensure that that is the outcome that they get. So please understand, this is not directed at the individual, but I have seen that comment repeated multiple times elsewhere, and I think it's important to address that. So thank you. That ends public participation.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Williamson. Yes.
It's Mike Williamson again. I'm still not giving you my address.
I'm still not asking for it.
I would be extremely remiss. I left out a member of my team, and she's probably the one that's done the most for me personally through this. I forgot to mention, because I was trying to tick them off on my fingers and I got distracted. Our middle school VP, Crystal Szabo, has stepped up to head portions of our team in a way that I've never seen any one of my VPs do. She is an extremely impressive person, and I wanted to make sure I publicly thanked her for all the work she's done for this district, and in particular for middle school. And all of the people, the administrators who are from middle school, Cara and Fred and Joe Schumacher and everybody, can tell you that she is a tireless advocate for middle school. Sometimes even asking them things like, when was the last time you were in a middle school? I don't think you know. So I just want to make sure I added that because I realized I'd left her out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are on item number 6, consent items, the approval of our bills payable. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, Dr. Scarpino, can you call the roll?
Fiorentino,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Zettler, Stevens,
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. McNicholas,
Aye.
Lamarca.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. This is item number 7. This is the approval of the revised district calendar for 2021. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
We
Was
need-
that Joe?
That was
I'll
Joe.
second.
Joe, and then Leslie. Got it.
Okay, is there any discussion on this? Nancy? Mary? Okay, Dr. Scarpino, please call the roll.
Stevens,
Aye.
Lamarca,
Aye.
Scarpino, aye. Zettler,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Fiorentino,
Aye.
McNicholas.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you. We are now on board discussion. Any board discussion additional? Mr. Stevens?
I would still like to have a straw vote so that we're on record for the public. I think we have an obligation to do that.
Are you comfortable with just a straw vote so that we don't need to have a special board meeting?
As long as it's recorded, yes.
Okay, so this is an unofficial vote, but I will go down, and I will do this because it's unofficial, to see if board members have a sense of whether or not they're supportive of the remote learning. Mr. Fiorentino.
Yes, I am supportive of the updated plan.
Mr. Stevens.
I am supportive of this plan.
Mrs. Lamarca.
I am supportive of this plan.
Dr. Scarpino.
Yes, I support the plan.
Mary McNicholas.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question for me?
The question is whether you are supportive of the new remote learning plan.
Yes, absolutely.
And Mrs. Etler?
I'm supportive of the plan.
Okay, and I too am supportive of the plan.
Thank
So
you.
I do not see a need to come back for a special meeting. We did, as I noted earlier, on a resolution from the 14th.
For the public, though, who may not understand why we're doing a straw vote, is because legally it wasn't posted 48 hours ahead of time, so we couldn't legally vote on it tonight.
Well, yes. So in addition to, we had the resolution that we passed on the 14th that gives Mr. Hyde the ability to modify the plan. Should we have wanted to have a vote, regardless of it already being authority given to Mr. Hyde, that would have had to have been posted on our agenda 48 hours in advance because of the Open Meetings Act. It was not on our agenda for voting tonight because of the previous resolution. And based on the straw poll, based on the input from board members and no one requesting that we go for another meeting and post it, and consensus being that we are in support of the plan, in addition to the authority that was already listed out in that long resolution, we are all in support of superintendent for implementing. And also keeping in mind, I will remind you that in that resolution, it allows a superintendent to modify, to make changes. He'll be in consultation, bringing any major changes back to us, but he does have the authority to do his job. Okay. All set? All right. Any other board discussion?
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mr.
I would like
Fiorentino.
to acknowledge the passing of Algonquin President John Schmidt this past week. And for those of you that know Mr. Schmidt, he was a tireless public servant and a huge supporter of our school system. So I just wanted to say thank you and also say that my thoughts and prayers are being extended to the Schmidt family.
Thank you for that. I think we all were shocked and offer our condolences, and may our all memories of him be a blessing to us and keep us focused on our school district. Anything else? All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
So, second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Have a good evening.
I'm doing these